And we're live. What's going on, everybody? Happy Hump Day. And today we have a special guest that's going to join us here in a little bit. He's running a little bit behind, so that's cool. It happens. Uh, Glad we were able to pin him down. But Alan Bishop's going to be joining us tonight and sitting and giving maybe some new perspective and some new answers on some of the questions that you guys have, and get to know Alan a little bit better. I've known him for a few years now, and guy's very, very knowledgeable. He's been at this since he was a kid like me. Moonshine as a child, and brought up around it, and very knowledgeable. So we look forward to bringing him on. What's going on, Anthony? What's up, brother? Good to have y'all on here. So I've got to spread the word. I got to spread the links. Y'all know the drill. Let's see. I keep forgetting to split the screen so I can kind of keep a little bit in touch with what's going on here while I share these damn links. It's hard for me to do this. Let's try to shrink this page down so I can see just comments over here. What's up, Alpha? What's up, Mother Grip? Hey, Scott. What's up, Curtis? Yeah, Alan will be on here in a little bit. He's running a little bit behind, but that just gives me a chance to share these links everywhere. Oh, hell, let's see. And it takes me a few minutes to do that anyway, so that'll give him a chance to get home. He's a very busy man. I was glad I was able to pin him down for a date on here with everybody. He's pretty busy, as you all will find out soon how busy this man is. So he has to, I guess, it's a pretty busy schedule he has to follow, especially now. What's going on, Toby? What's up, Jason? No, it's Mr. Santa, Mr. Phil, but he's not here tonight, brother. But let me get these links shared, and we'll get Alan in here in a little bit, get him on here and pick his brains for a little while. So hope everybody's having a good week so far. Like it's going to be a pretty good week. I won't be here Saturday because I'm going to be at an awesome party that I wish you all could be at. For those that can come, need to be there. For Phil Billy's party, his full moon party coming up this weekend. Hey, that's Phil Billy, brother. No grip. I'm Bad Santa. Me and Phil Billy are brothers, and so I stream here on the podcast as well. I share his page and all right, Scott. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna be. I wish y'all could be with me Saturday. We're gonna be at Philbilly's this weekend, partying down. So if you can make it, you should be there. All right, let me get these links shared, and I will be right back with everybody. Y'all, what was that? What was that on Saturday Night Live? Y'all just talk amongst yourselves. That old lady or whatever. It's funny shit. Little old lady or whatever they called her. I used to love Saturday Night Live before all this wokeness and all this crazy shit came about. It was a pretty good show to watch on Saturday night, but nowadays it's all fucked up these days, man. I can't stand it. It doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be political. We try to avoid that stuff on here, and we've done a pretty good job. But I just can't stand it when we can't do anything hardly without it. Can't even read posts on Facebook and YouTube and stuff. It's like I always try to angle it, towards politics or Trump or somebody. And this is crazy. So let's get these links shared and we'll start answering some questions. Oh, hell, you ain't going to be there, Toby? I was looking forward to fucking with you, man. I was looking forward to messing with your head. Toby's a pretty good fella, especially when he's drunk. He's pretty funny. He has better jokes when he's drunk than he does on here. Them old dad jokes, man. They get pretty bad. But yeah, he's a character. So who I was gonna make it? Scott, you damn sure better if you live close by, brother. Swing over there, meet everybody, man. We're all pretty chill, laid back, have a good time with us, man. Everybody's chill, nobody's uptight. We smoke a big old fatty and just get laid back and have a good time, enjoy yourselves, and smoke a big old joint of I don't give a fuck. Did you see that joke? What's his name? That black comedian talking about smoking a doobie and it's one big hit of I don't give a fuck. Yes, that was pretty funny. I can't think what his name is. What's going on, Wayne? Good to see you on here, brother. I can't think of that comedian's name. He's pretty funny. Look here, I'm representing Wayne. Did you notice that? I can't see. Can I? Oh, I better stand up. There you go. Representing. I had on the other one the other day, the black one with the red letters, but it's in the dirty clothes. All right, I didn't get all the links sent out that I like to, but Facebook likes to limit me. I think they'd lighten up a little bit. Not Facebook. But we love them anyway, because we have to. What's up? Well, did you get your patent issues solved there, Tracy? I figured you might like that shirt. Did you have to change your? Did your attorneys talk to who was it that was giving you shit? I can't remember who it was now. Some rapper or somebody, wasn't it? Giving you shit about putting a letter inside the spades on your label. It's crazy shit. Fly. I like that shit. Killed that fly. It's pretty quick, but I wonder if I caught that on camera. Like ninja reflexes out there. Awesome, awesome. Well, now did you get in on the $5 raffle and I think the other one's 20. Now the $20 raffle is for Fearbilly Steel. And then the $5 raffle is for just a whole bunch of other, small stuff. Now the Fearbilly Steel, a certain percentage of that is going to Shiner Sam's wife, and of course some of it has to go to him because that's like $2,000-3,000 steel. But the $5, 100% of proceeds go to Shiner Sam. Mike Epps, it might be, and I just somebody showed it to me on Facebook. I could probably find it in my damn. Let's see. Oh, you Brady said that. He's funny shit. Maybe I just saw it. Yeah, it's not on there. Maybe I just saw it while I was seeing one somebody sent me and then scrolling through. Anyway, it was funny as shit. Let me Google that dude. Mike Epps, you see. No, it wasn't him. No, this is shit. He was the one that's talking shit about Diddy and didn't give a fuck. I mean, I can't remember what his name was, but he was cold as fuck. He talked some shit about Diddy and he didn't care. He's one that said, "No, Diddy, I ain't." It was, if you seen it, yeah, it was pretty funny. What's going on, Richard? Good to see you on here, brother. Yes, I am doing better. Thank you very much. You do? Well, damn, I'm jealous, Scott. I wished I had that set up. Mine's not that nice. Oh, damn, man. The anticipation. Yeah, I got mine where I can just run it straight off a wall adapter. I, I took the wires out of it and soldered them into a damn wall wart. I just let go straight. No, actually, it was not a wall wart. It was one of them. It was one of them USB plugs. It charged off USB after them batteries died, and I took all that shit apart and I pulled them wires out and I just hot wired them straight to that USB. Man, I didn't put a switch on it, so I just soldered two wires together, and the other two I just hold them together when I want to hit it. Man, it works. Yeah, I had to quit doing them dabs, man. White yellow angel yeast, not the Chinese brick, but using koji spores. No, but I've done some research on that and how that works. And I mean, they found that there's it's a fungus, that basically breaks down, these sugars into fermentables. We'll talk about that with Alan when he gets in. Speak of the devil, here he is, folks. Let me get this set up right. I don't know why that's small like that, but let's do that and then that. And welcome, Alan.
Hey, how's it going, man?
What's going on, brother?
Oh, not much. My internet may be a little slow. I apologize.
Well, I see your face in the
Yeah,
down in the bottom, but at the top it's not carrying forward. I'm not sure.
I think I think down in the bottom it's frozen on me. I figured
Yeah,
that
it
was going to
is.
happen. Yeah, yep, yep.
Well, I was hoping that we at least could get you on your face on here before it froze, but that's
Give me
all
just
right.
a
It
sec.
would be an episode with Alan Bishop if we didn't have some kind of technical difficulty.
Yeah,
I
something's
don't
for
think
sure always got to go wrong.
it always something happens, man. It's inevitable. Something always happens. That's what we have to deal with sometimes. I think I'm trying to think of what was it? Phil Billy's a couple years ago. No, I might have been on Ian's on Still Talking. It was on Ian's Still Talking. I guess same thing happened with it freezing up on you.
Right. Yeah, I
Uh,
tried to stop the camera and start it again, but don't look like that did nothing either. So,
oh well, that's all right.
yeah. Oh, I'm glad to be here, man. Sorry I was running behind. I had to go help
That's
my
all right.
dad
Well,
move his
I had
chair.
to. Yeah, that's a little better right there. I had to share the links anyway, so that
Good
that
deal.
works out just fine. I just now got all the links shared and started talking about our first question for the night.
Fantastic. Great.
and Clint Torf, another fellow distiller. Now, Clint, you've been on the legal side for 10, 12 years now. How long has it been?
Uh,
Clint he's another distiller. He's
gotcha.
a guy that frequents the chat here. Another very, very knowledgeable guy that helps me deal with some questions in chat while I'm long-winded answering some question from 20 minutes prior. I'll get questions and I want to get the true, the full answer out for everybody. So a lot of times there's some other questions that people ask while I'm answering it, and I'll get, it's not strange for me to get 20, 30 minutes behind, but we try to get them all answered. Sometimes you gotta hang around, and if you want to hear your answer, you gotta stick around for a little while. Because
Uh,
I do get a little long-winded at times.
I do the same thing. Don't feel bad, man.
I
Don't feel
won't, brother. But our first question, and can you see the screen? Okay, you on a phone
Yep.
or a PC or?
I'm on my PC, so I
Awesome,
got it
awesome,
perfect.
awesome, cool. So the first question said we heard about homemade yellow label angel yeast, not the Chinese brick, but using koji spores to make your own and just adding your favorite yeast. And I've done some research on the yellow label and how they've used this fungus to, I guess take the place of enzymes, or I guess it has its own enzymes that
Yeah.
break down these complex carbs. It's amazing. Have you dealt with or used the yellow label angel yeast yet?
I have. So I've also propagated that yellow angel yeast several times myself. So I have quite a bit of information on this question. So
Awesome.
um, I highly suspect, and I've said this on one piece at a time, that angel yeast is probably, and I don't want to point fingers at anybody. Granted, it's in China and it is what it is.
Right.
But it's probably stolen technology from a project that was going on over here some years ago for self-converting yeast for biofuel.
Right.
That's what it looks like. It's definitely a genetically modified yeast. Now, in terms of making my own angel yellow, so I have done koji before and used that alongside regular yeast strains. In fact, Distiller Woody last year, he did an article for the 2025 Practical Distillers Almanac that was all about using koji. And I can't remember what the other thing is that he actually uses. It's not koji. It has another name and I can't remember what it is. But really, really nice in-depth article in the 2025 Almanac. Interestingly enough, another little known fact. So the liquid alpha amylase and beta amylase that you can buy as exogenous or exogenous. I never know exactly how to say that right.
I say exogenous. I'm country too, but I've heard some people say no, it's exogenous.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, exogenous.
Yep. I see that on my YouTube channel all the time where people correct me on that. And I appreciate it. At the same time, I'm like, it took you put way more effort into actually typing that than I'm going to put into trying to say it the right way. So
some people give more fucks than I do, obviously, about certain things. And, I correct myself sometimes, but, that's just always how I was, heard it talked. And, when you grew up in East Kentucky or in rural America, it's exogenous, and if you're, probably a PhD in chemistry and, you've had the Nobel Prize, it's probably exogenous. I don't.
Well, the interesting thing about those is those are actually fungal derived themselves. So those are actually derived from something very similar to koji, if not in some cases koji itself.
Right.
And they have a much longer history than people realize, going back to, I believe, the mid 1880s over in Illinois, where there were several large distilleries around Pekin, Illinois. So they've existed for a very, very, very long time.
Right.
I know that there are probably multiple different strains of koji and multiple different types of fungus that'll give, different applications, just like yeast does, and different flavor profiles. But to be honest and fair, I guess it never, I either never had the time or it never interested me enough to dive any more in depth into it than what I already have. Not that there's not utility to it, but there's only so many hours in a day, right? Like A lot of people don't know this. That white and green mold that you see on sauerkraut,
Right.
that will actually produce alpha amylase as well. But I've I figured that out by accident, and I still haven't really tracked all that information down yet either. So there's really neat stuff out there. It's just a matter of having time to do it.
Yeah, most people, anything white and moldy it's immediately lacto. It's like,
Right.
no, come on now.
No.
Just because it's white and it's in your doesn't make it lacto. But
You,
everybody wants to be a exobiologist and uh, and Peggy, and I'm like, it could be a lot of things. And
yeah, a whole
sometimes
lot.
I've seen some stuff that doesn't look like lacto that everybody's calling lacto, and I'm like,
No.
I don't think that's lacto, bro.
a, a lot of people I see on Facebook, some of them are getting lacto, but a lot of what they're actually getting most of the time, just visually, looks a lot more like floor yeast, FLOR yeast, like they use in sherry production.
Right,
And if they're running and they're not losing any amount of alcohol after letting that set for weeks on end, it definitely is not any strain of lacto that I know of.
right.
So if you let it set for a long time with lacto on it and you're not losing alcohol and you ain't distilling something after say a couple
Yeah.
weeks that tastes a little bit like soggy ramen noodles, it probably ain't lacto.
Yeah, lacto like sugar and alcohol, man. It'll definitely weaken it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I always try to everybody gets a lacto infection. I'm like it could be a blessing, or it could be a curse.
Yeah.
Early on, it's kind of a curse because it competes with sugar and it eats alcohol too.
Yeah.
It eats sugar and alcohol. It likes it.
Well, I
Kind of like the acetobacters. It can be a horrible thing. But
well, and the thing is, if people really want it, and so I do lactose souring on almost everything because I propagate my own yeast, but
right,
you can find really good symbiotic lactose. So my yeast program, what I do, I'm not just propagating the yeast strain, I'm propagating lactic with it.
right,
It works in symbiosis. So what's happening is that yeast gets up and going. Well, the pH is still relatively high, say 5.2, 5.5, somewhere in there. It'll
mm-hmm.
get 3/4 of the way through fermentation before that lacto wakes up, because as it goes through
That's
fermentation,
perfect. Yeah,
it drops pH. It hits about 4.5. That lacto wakes up. That'll drop it down into the threes. The yeast will go dormant. And then the lacto is basically keeping anything else bad from getting in there.
right,
And the cool thing is, for people who don't know, and I know you know this, but if you want a really good strain, you can either buy a cheese culture,
right.
or the easy way to do it is to
Greek
literally just go to the
Greek
store.
yogurt.
Yeah, yeah, or buy Activia.
Yeah,
Activia yogurt
yeah,
do the same thing, man.
yeah.
It's a great strain. I've used it many times. It's
Yeah, the
probably not
Greek
cheap.
yogurt's a good strain. Yeah, just the straight old Greek yogurt. Yeah, or
Yeah,
if you get a good lacto infection, you can save it. And we talked earlier. I think we were, it was in the same episode we were talking, about yeast logs, and somebody
yeah,
brought up lacto, and I'm like, well, why don't you just make a lacto log,
yeah.
and be a great way to propagate that as well. When it gets time, you can do that way. I try to keep everything somewhat sanitary. I'm a wine making freak too, so I try
Yeah.
to keep everything sanitary because that's something that you generally don't want in wines. But I found out recently that some wine people you're getting the lacto thing in the wine, and some people,
Hmm.
that's kind of a new thing in the wine
Well,
industry. It's
all
always been
those
taboo, but
all those California Chardonnays, those big buttery Chardonnays from California from back in the 90s, those were all lacto fermented back in the
really,
day. And then
I
anybody
thought
who's
it's
in
something new. That's good to
no,
know.
no, they've been doing that for a long time, but that's where that big buttery note in those California Chardonnays come from, is from
Cool.
lacto fermentation. And then for people who are into cider, which adjacent to wine, somewhere between wine and beer, obviously, but
Right.
most of the old cideries, man, they were as bad as the distilleries. They never pitched yeast, and they also never cleaned their rafters. So, like, you walk into one of those places, if you can find one that's still producing, like out on the East Coast, and it just looks like inches of dust and cobweb, and it's just straight lacto and yeast,
Yeah,
and
you
just
can
open
scrape
top.
it off the
Yeah,
walls. It's
yep.
kind of, we've talked about that too. I've talked about how you've gone around and collected yeast from distilleries that are not
Mhm.
even there anymore.
Yeah.
And that yeast sticks around. It doesn't go
Oh, it
anywhere.
does, man.
And
It does. I'll tell you the other thing I'm really interested in now. Now this is next level geekery, man, and I know that you're into this kind of stuff, so I don't mind to dive into this is one of those weird things that you would never like really say out loud most of the
Right.
time, but it interests me. So I'm not a microbiologist. I don't claim to be. My buddy Pat Heist is brilliant at all that stuff,
Oh yes,
and I
he is.
love
I
him, love
I
him, love
love
him.
listening to that dude talk, man. I mean,
I
you
do
talk
too.
about somebody that knows their shit and can just lay it down and get it scientific, even use the
Yep.
scientific,
Yep.
names for everything. Is just
And he,
amazes me. That dude amazes me, man.
he and I could not be more different when it comes to that because he wants to know what makes all of it tick down to, the cellular and below and
Right.
subcellular level. And I'm like, listen, if it is making good quality stuff and I found a traditional way to propagate it, then I'm good with it. So the thing that I'm very interested in biomes though, because I think that, like finding these old yeast strains, sometimes with these old distilleries, there ain't even a building left. The only thing that's left of the distiller might be a gravestone if it's still there a lot of
Right.
times. So these yeasts really are, a part of that heritage. But I'm becoming very much interested and very much more interested in how, say, the character of a distillery. And man, this is one that I need to actually get Pat interested in. How does the character of a distillery change based on who is working with the mash on a daily basis and the biome that they are carrying on themselves? Because I can tell you that I have already noticed, all other factors being the same, if I let someone in the distillery touch the mash who's not there working on a daily basis, sometimes there is a difference. Sometimes there's a difference. So it's not massive, but there is an effect. So I'm very interested in how people's biomes affect fermentation. So that's a weird little piece of alchemy nobody really seems to have looked at. So
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I'm kind of like Patrick, but I don't have the knowledge that Patrick does. But I'm definitely into, on a molecular level what makes things tick, and I'll read it, a lot of it. Some of it I'll understand, and some of it's like, I'll need somebody to explain exactly to me what they're talking about. But I get the gist of most of it, man. But it amazes me.
yep.
It's amazing. Clint's like saying here the Chinese use Rhizopus fungi to make liquor, and Aspergillus rosé, the Chinese yellow label angel yeast, has too many extra nutrients that make it like a turbo yeast. They might be using a turbo. Um, you mentioned it earlier at the source of a lot of these exogenous enzymes. I thought a lot of it may have been sourced from like sweet potatoes because I know that they have a lot there, and I've seen somewhere that they get some uh, enzymes from them and from other natural sources.
Probably
And
beta glucanase in particular from
yeah,
sweet potatoes is my
yeah,
guess. Yeah.
could very
Yeah.
well be, or yeah. And
I,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I know the material data sheets for the enzymes I've used in the past on the alpha for sure. I'd have to check on the beta, but the alpha is definitely fungal derived on the ones that I've used. But
Right, right.
I'd have to check on the beta. But yeah, I'm sure they get them from whatever source that they
Well,
can.
I would say most of what I know that probably what North Georgia and what a lot of other people sell, it probably all comes from Firm Solutions.
Yep,
And
yep.
and so Patrick, however he sourced it, and you know,
Right off that boat.
yep, exactly.
That's just the way it works. And nothing wrong with that at all. It's interesting. So I agree, Clint. I do think that whatever the base strain is, um, I do think that it is a form of turbo yeast, and there are a shit ton of nutrients in there. But I can also tell you that the reason that I believe it to be a potentially pirated piece of technology is because you can propagate it and the properties do continue and they don't get uneven, right? So if this was a fungal version, purely fungal derived version of creating enzymes, you would not expect that to survive generation after generation in a yeast culture, and if it did survive generation after generation in a yeast culture, you would think it would start to get pretty off kilter over time. And I know that myself and Costa Rica Bob have both propagated the hell out of Angel Yellow. Bob's probably 50 or 60 generations in at this point, I would say, and it's still doing what it did the first time he used it.
Interesting.
So
it's not had any changes or adaptations that's changed its character. Now, as far as flavor wise, this is something that I've not used it yet. So I've got a brick of it upstairs. I picked up a brick off Amazon, and I'm going to do some experimentation with it this summer. You know, just straight, you know, with grains, just letting it do the full conversions. I'm amazed at how you can just dump some cracked corn and dump that in there and just let it do its thing, and it does it. You know, I've just totally goes against everything. No cook. It's just so crazy.
It's a weird one. It's if you here's what I will say. On small grains that you don't have to take the high temperature and a temp anyways, so in a cook anyways, so something like let's just say rolled oats or something like that, or even just whole oats that you ground, right. You only have to go to 165 anyways. It does pretty good. Now, when it comes to corn, it will convert, and it will convert a decent amount, but it is slow. And
yeah, that's what I've heard. It takes a lot.
And it almost every time I have done it with corn like that, it has developed a bad lacto, and the yield has been trash.
Right.
Now, if you scald that corn even just for a few minutes with 190-degree water and then let it cool off and then pitch, it works a whole lot better and a whole lot more efficiently. But in my experience with the propagation that I was doing with it, and I'm not propagating it anymore because it's if I were a dude in an apartment that had, you know, a 15 and a 5, and I was I was the king of the neighborhood, I'd be all about that stuff.
Right. Yeah. You just couldn't cook a big large amount of corn and do all that and store everything and do it. Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. And it doesn't make a bad quality product. I will say that it's a decent quality product, but it's not anything exciting, right? It'll make alcohol that'll get you drunk, or that you can put in cocktails, and that's about where it'll land you. Pretty neutral in a lot of ways.
Right. Now, flavor wise, what do you think? I've heard a mixed bag from some people that say, you know, it's fine, it's pretty neutral, and I've heard other people say it's trash. So I'm
neutral's about the best I could do for you. I think that probably a lot of people they probably do get the lacto thing, and again, you let it set very long, not only are you losing alcohol, but you're getting that, like, to me it's always like soggy ramen noodles once it sets for a couple days. Right. I don't know, or like trying to eat ramen noodles or chicken noodle soup when you're sick. You know, it just doesn't quite taste right. So
yeah, the koji produces alpha, beta glucopectinase, and a few other enzymes. Yeah, and invertase, maybe even. You know.
Mm-hmm. There's a really great article. I'll have to find it again. I found it years ago, and I think American Whiskey History, I think Laura republished it maybe about a year ago. But there's an industry article from the late 1800s that talked about the gentleman who worked at those distilleries in Illinois, and how he had introduced koji into the production process there.
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of really good detail in it, especially for the time period when it was written.
Sounds interesting. So I guess we should have probably done this at the very beginning, but we had a pretty good question off the bat. For the listeners that may have been under a rock for the last few years, maybe you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about yourself. I know you hate to do that, but I don't want to do it and miss something and or misspeak and get something wrong. But where did you first start out? Was it with the King's outfit?
So on the legal side of the industry, yeah, it was
right. Well, now I know illegal side. You did it since you were in your early teens, kind of like me.
Yeah. Grew up around it.
Yeah, for you, it was more of a family thing. For me, it's just more of a curiosity. So,
yeah,
you
want anything for Christmas? You better.
Yeah. You got much better indoctrination into it than I did. for sure.
Yeah, I
So,
got
but tell a little bit more about yourself on the legal side.
yeah. So I started off at Copper and Kings. I guess that's been 12 going on 13 years ago now. Whenever they basically I'd been on the illicit side and had gotten myself to a point, and this is right around the time that moonshiner started to really kind of catch on TV,
Right.
where everybody and their brother was really interested in moonshine. And I was in my mid 20s and kind of stupid. And so the long and short of it is that a lot more people knew what I was doing than what I was comfortable with knowing what I was doing, even though
Right.
it may not have been that big of a deal. And my now wife definitely, she just told me, she's like, you got to find a job doing this. And
Yeah.
at the time, Indiana didn't. There really were no craft distilleries here. Huber's had a very, very small brandy distillery because they had an addendum added to their license to where they could make brandy to fortify wine. And there had been talk, including some summer study committee stuff I went to with my friend who was a state rep at that time, Steve Davison, who's passed away since then, talking about legalizing, craft distilling, and just a very slow process. And so I
Right.
had to go to Louisville, and luckily the bourbon boom had started. And
Yeah.
so there were a bunch of new distilleries opening, and pretty much every time I saw one that was coming online, I wasn't being picky, guys. It wasn't like I absolutely love apple brandy in particular, but I I would have taken whatever job at whatever distillery I could have got, to be honest with you, at that point.
Right.
So just get my foot in the door. But so Copper and Kings at the time was run and owned by Joe and Leslie Heron, and they gave me a call back, and we went and met, and gave them a gave them a jar of shine. This is the stupidest thing ever. I had the worst resume anyone's ever written. I'm pretty
Right.
positive.
Right.
And then here's a jar of shine. Right, first time I've met you people. Here you go. Like, can I work here? And it worked out. I got in, worked with a guy by the name of Brandon O'Daniel, who'd been the head winemaker down at Elk Creek Winery for a number of years. I think he was actually the first graduate of the University of Kentucky's Enology School,
Cool.
which is interesting. I think they actually built that program specifically for him at the time. But so they turned it, his weirdest thing ever, man. They had prototyped some stuff at Moonshine University, and they wanted to do California grapes and turn that into American brandy. So we worked with Muscat and Colombard and Chenin Blanc a lot. And then once a year we would do Vidal Blanc because it would grow in Kentucky. Um, we didn't really have much of a fermentation program with the grapes. They were actually bringing in low wines from out in California. So it had already been fermented and stripped. Now we had protocols over that, as far as, we laid out what we wanted with yeast or particular harvest of grapes, and we'd go out there
Right.
every year and look at it and all that stuff. And then we did the doubling, and of course we created several absinthes at that time with great brandy bases, gin, things of that nature. And it was a cool experience. It was a nice little foot in the door. Louisville at the time was an interesting place during the start of that bourbon boom, because it's like any other industry. It has its little cliques, and I quickly figured out that in between Louisville and Lexington, there were two cliques, and you were either a member of one or you were a member of the other, and you damn
Right.
sure weren't a member of both of them. And my dumb redneck ass didn't fit in on either side of that
Right.
equation.
Right. Right.
So I found myself quickly figuring out that I think the only friend I had in the distilling industry that at that time was Steve Beam, who was always been a big supporter and a very, very good friend. And so he became sort of the person I leaned on when I had questions or I
Well, a lot
was,
of people would probably recognize Steve from the Moonshiner Show.
yeah,
He's
yeah.
he took Tim in,
Hmm.
and of course, a lot of people that watched the show years ago are familiar with all that. But yeah, great guy.
He's a fantastic guy, and I actually, so backtrack just a hair bit here. I actually met him through Tim and Tickle. So that after that first season of Moonshiners, my wife and I kind of got hooked up selling merchandise for Tim and Tickle at
Right.
a few signings, and it was it was really
Well,
good
that's something
cover.
I didn't know. That's
Yeah, yeah. There are reasons that I have feelings that I do about a lot of people in the industry, but we'll keep
right.
that separate. But and to be fair, they were at that time all was hunky dory and all good, and I think it is now. But the long and short of it is, it was a great cover to be able to. So the vast majority of the stuff I made at home was going to Clearwater, Florida to begin with, or it was going here locally to a certain motorcycle group.
Right.
And I won't say their names, but
Right. Right.
so
Understandable.
no better way to be able to go on ostensibly a free vacation, sell some merchandise, get paid for that, and then also be able to sell some shine right underneath the eyes of law enforcement. I will
Yeah.
never forget this, man. For any of you guys that didn't get out and see those guys whenever that show first came out, and I know it's popular to hate on that show now, but if you guys didn't go see those guys when they were doing those early signings, this is the craziest thing I ever saw in my life. Everywhere that you would go, there would be excise, state excise, or control, or sometimes even TTB, or sometimes other alphabet agencies, right?
Yep.
Because everybody, even if they're on the legal side of things, likes an outlaw. And the crazy thing that would happen is they would come in before everything got going, and they'd want to come up to Tim and Tickle and be like, "Hey, we'd love to. Here's my badge. I'm undercover, right out in the
Yeah.
open. Can we get a picture?" And then that was like your moment, right? If you
Right.
found somebody that you're going to sell to, and you got anything you want to get rid of, go out in the alleyway at that exact moment and
Yeah.
do what you're doing and be done. So, but that's how I met Steve Beam, was actually through Tim and through Lisa Wicker at that time, and became really good friends with Steve through that. Um, Answered a few fermentation questions for he and Lisa at the time, and some alcohol questions at the time, and for Tim at the time, and that was really the hook that the now wife saying go get a job was one thing, but like actually getting a little hands on, very, very little. And I mean, very little at Limestone Branch, but that was the hook. That's what got
So,
me in.
so what was Steve's story? Was he like the stepchild of the Beam family, or a cousin that once removed, or what
So,
exactly?
so the Beam family is massive.
Right. A
And
buddy of mine married into the Beam family.
mhm.
He married one of the gals in the Beam family, and I think they
S-
run liquor stores all over it. I'm not sure.
so he would
Uh,
be his great grandfather. I think it's great. Might be great. Basically, would be the progenitor of the famous line of beams,
right.
and they all each line. But let me just say this: they all worked for multiple distilleries at different times, and some of them own their own distilleries. Like Early Times was originally owned by one of the Beams, um, and once you get into Prohibition, except prior to Prohibition and right after Prohibition, like the Beams have been doing this for generations.
Right.
And so what would happen would be, a lot of people think the Beams moved jobs a lot, but they really didn't. What happened was the Whiskey Trust knew that they knew what the hell they were doing. And so the Whiskey Trust, when they'd buy a new distillery and they didn't like the way it was run, they'd fucking fire everybody and then bring in a Beam for 6 months to get it on track.
Right.
So yeah, Steve would be he'd be a distant cousin to Freddie No and Fred No over at Jim Beam.
Right.
Same family, just a little different branch of it.
Right.
So
Cool.
uh, yeah, I mean they were all over, not just Kentucky, Pennsylvania. They were yeah.
Now, Pennsylvania kind of brings up Stolen Wolf. You work with
Yeah.
these guys out there a lot and do some reenactments, and hopefully we can talk about that in a little bit. But I don't want to interrupt you. But that intrigues me. It did was it those guys that you did the absinthe reenactment with, or was that here in Kentucky? Maybe that was here in Kentucky that you did that.
Oh, the recreation of the absinthe.
Yeah.
So that was my buddy Brian Cushing, Victorian Barroom over on YouTube.
Okay.
And that was a project we came up with years ago at Locust Grove. So Locust Grove is a historic site there in Louisville,
Right.
with a little small farm distillery. Although they're not allowed to distill, we can mash in and do all that stuff when we were doing it. And so that kind of kicked off because years ago I had found a couple of historical references to Switzerland County, Indiana, and to absinthe being distilled in Switzerland County, Indiana in 1830. Now,
Right.
in 1830, absinthe is still marginal, like really marginal, even in the Swiss Alps and in France. Like it's not even a common local regional drink by 1830. And so to find two distillers in 1830, of course they were previously French Huguenots, so they would have been from the right area. Um, but they were producing enough absinthe in the middle of nowhere, Indiana, that they actually hired a cooper to make barrels to ship it down to New Orleans at the time. And the accounts are not they don't give you exactly the ingredients that they were using, but I kind of know what was being used anywhere between 1750 and about 1875 or so. I
Yeah,
can pretty much
what
kind
was
of put my
available? Yeah.
yeah. And so you start thinking about, okay, so what would commonly be available to them? What could they grow themselves? What was the base alcohol? Because the base alcohol in the Swiss Alps and in France was usually brandy until later on it became sugar beet.
Right.
Um, they could not have warranted, even though these were the first successful winemakers in the United States, they wouldn't have warranted using brandy as a base for absinthe. So we started thinking, you know what? The cheapest thing they had was corn whiskey. So we took corn whiskey and we went out to one of the last standing Swiss Huguenot homesteads. That's a reenactment homestead out in Switzerland County, and worked with them and shot some film out there and gathered some botanicals from out there and gathered our yeast from out there. Went to Locust Grove, made the mash, took that to Kentucky Artisan. Those guys, Jade Peterson down there, he distilled that for us. I took that back to French Lick and made absinthe out of it, and then we made a movie. It was a very convoluted, very
Oh, I loved it, man. I eat that shit up. I love that kind of stuff, man. I watched that and I
good,
dug it big
good.
time, man. I love that kind of content.
You know,
And
man, that makes me
Mikey
that make
Frame says hi, and
what's up,
Wayne
Mike?
says howdy.
Hell yeah. What's up,
What's
guys?
good?
Dude, let me tell you, it makes my day to hear you say that you love that, because I feel like there's a lot of people out there that do a lot of things and they're just trying to get attention. And my thing is, I don't care. Like, that stuff I do for fun. If there's 5 people that get that and like it, hell yeah. I made
I'm
it
the
for those
same.
5 people.
I'm not here to impress or to be seen or heard or all that. I just love helping others and enjoying promoting and furthering the history and the and helping others learn to do it and pass it on down to generations
Yeah,
and
exactly.
answer the questions that they've got. I see a lot of shows and it's hard to say anything without sounding petty, or I'm not trying to knock them, but I don't think they're giving people what they want. I don't think people
Amen.
necessarily want
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. I think
Yeah.
that content, like that story of the absinthe and the history,
Yeah.
I love that shit, man. I mean, I eat that stuff, that and the science of it. I mean, that's just totally me.
It,
I mean, I
my,
totally dig it. And the stuff that you guys do up in Mount Vernon,
yep.
love
Yep.
that too. And what was it you did with Stolen Wolf? You did some historical stuff with him as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Real quick, one more thing on the absinthe things.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to jump in.
It's
Go ahead.
okay. I 2 things that I love about that. So the fact that we found the names of those distillers, and when we finished the product, we took it to the grave sites. I love doing that. I like to return it back to who it came from. And then we also there may have been a bottle of that got auctioned off for crazy money for
Yeah,
charity at one point in time. But
awesome.
my favorite part of that whole thing, because it took like 3.5 years to film, because Brian was
Right.
busy doing stuff. It was in the middle of COVID. If you go back and you watch that, watch Brian's hair, because he had like a giant, head of curly Jack White looking hair at one point in time,
Oh,
and
yeah, I
then
remember.
all of a
Yeah, I
sudden,
remember.
next scene gone. Gone.
Yeah,
It doesn't even look like the same guy.
yeah. It was kind of you could tell it was like a year later,
Mm-hmm.
that it was done. And for those that haven't watched it, is that on your YouTube or where can they watch that? Because I want everybody to watch that
Yeah,
haven't.
it should be on the
It's
one.
awesome. I mean, they've got period clothing on and
Mm-hmm.
everything, man. It's awesome. I love
should
it.
should be on the One Piece at a Time Distilling Institute on YouTube, and then
All
also
right,
on the Victorian Barroom on YouTube. And
all
also, if
right.
you guys,
Let's see here. One piece. Let me pop that link up for those that don't
I
have
can't
it
remember
real
what the name of
quickly.
that thing is, the documentary.
Absence. Well, you could just search absence and
Yeah.
you'll find it. But I'm going to put the link up here. This is one piece at a time dealing. Distilling Institute that I misspelled. In a institute. Okay. All right. I was typing that in, trying to get everything done and being quick this evening.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, there's a link for now. That's for that page. Let me go ahead and get some of these links out while I'm thinking about it. Here is well, I'll put the Distillers Talk and Old Homestead out there here in a little bit when we
Yeah.
talk more
Yeah.
about that a
Yeah.
little bit later. But for those that haven't gone to Alan's YouTube page, definitely go to that page and just start binge watching, man, because it's some of the best content you're going to get on the internet.
And I hope people find it useful. I really do. I had
If
to
they don't, they need to read it again because they're missing something. I mean, there's something useful in every one of them, and it's just I love it. I dig that kind of stuff. Especially the history stuff because that's stuff I don't know. You know, we can sit and talk
yeah.
about enzymes and bringing down carbs and all that stuff all day, and I enjoy talking about that with beginners and helping them and answering all the questions and breaking it everything down for them. I love that, but really the history is something that I've been kind of negligent in learning about. I don't
Mhm.
know a lot of different types of beverages from all over the world, different
Yeah.
alcoholic, but and that's kind of something that I've been getting into and trying to learn more about. Not I'm not saying I know it all as far as the other stuff, but it's just it gets boring, and I'm constantly seeking knowledge, and these are things that I really don't know as much about. I
Yeah.
don't know a lot of the foreign different
Well, I think
distillations.
a lot of distillers are like that, man. And what I would say is you can really bury yourself in like the details of the science, and then there's nothing wrong with that. And this is again a difference between like me and Pat Heist. The other side of it is, I can, man, you can take a trained chemist who went to school for distillation and put them in a distillery, and they can make the most lifeless spirit in the world. So
Yes,
but because the thing about it is, do you know enough that if you are on the fly and you're improvising, that you can make it work, right? How can you? And me and Eric Wolf say this all the time. So we can do the thing, but much like playing music, you have the main riff of the song or the main chord structure.
right.
Can you improv over that? And are you confident enough in the skills that you have that you can do that comfortably? And at that point, that's when you go into the history, because the only way you know whether or not you created something new is whether or not you know it ever existed before,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I thought it was funny. I entered I think it was brandy contest last year, and everybody's like, "Man, I thought you'd win. You know so much. I thought you'd win." I'm like, "Well, if knowledge equated, the best flavor coming off the tap, it would be gold. But
Yeah.
it doesn't always work out that way, man.
Uh,
Uh,
I've been putting on my own shirt for 41 years, and sometimes I still put it on backwards.
yeah, it doesn't always work out that way.
No.
It's usually pretty good. I mean, I have to say I haven't had a lot of shitty liquor in quite some time. I did have to dump an experiment out though. It's
Oh,
first
that
time
happens.
I've listen. It was horrible. I don't know what spawned me to do it, but Ann and I put up a lot of when we do. I freeze a lot of berries and stuff that I do the brandies with, and I'll get a bunch of berries. We'll freeze them, and there's a winery here that has a deal set up. You come in and you pick all you want, and you give them half, and you keep half, and
Hell
they
yeah.
don't have to employ anyone to come in and pick their stuff for them. And you can go in and chat, buy a bottle of wine, and the people there are wonderful. They took me back, and he's showing me all his stuff, and I'm talking to him about stuff, and he's like, "Wow, I need to get you here more often." And I'm going to try to talk the guy into maybe making some brandy, but really laid back people, awesome, awesome people. And so got to, hanging out with them. Anyway, we put up a bunch of blackberry jam and grape jellies and all this other stuff. And we way overdid it. I'm obviously, I'm crazy. I get over into stuff and I just do too much. So we had like 20, 30 quarts of each flavor, and it just it almost completely filled one refrigerator that I have.
Uh,
So I don't eat that much biscuits and jelly, like I used to. So I had quite a bit, and it was starting to get a little bit dated and start losing some flavor. a few years old. It wasn't as good anymore. So I'm like, man, I need this fridge space anyway. Um, so let's just try to make see if we can put some enzymes in here, pectic enzymes, and break down some of this pectin in there,
Hmm.
and get a gravity on it, and see if we can't, just ferment it out. And it was like a 4 or 5 day weekend, and Ann and I were gone, and I mashed that in before he left in the house, and it was in large blue with the lid, fermenter, and we come back, and I open up the lid off that thing, and I mean, just spores. I mean, I was just,
Yeah.
oh God! And I looked, and there was green fuzz,
Oh
red
no.
fuzz. I mean, I'm talking rainbow colors in this shit, and just hair sticking up, and looked like almost like some of it almost like grass growing, and moss and mold, and every fungus and
Oh.
mildew and bacteria, and it was horrible, man. It just the spores that hit me when I looked down in there just about killed me. I was choking, sneezing, coughing, and that was the first mash that I've thrown away in probably 20. It's been a long time. Uh, but that's what happens when you start experimenting with Fruit Loops
Yeah.
and all kinds of
Stuff
crazy
goes south
shit.
eventually. Yeah.
That's and I get a lot of that.
Uh,
Everybody's trying to do some crazy new stuff these days, so everybody's experimenting with different stuff, which I love. I'm not knocking it at all. I
yeah.
love it. I love that people are trying different things, experimenting, and that's you never know. You may happen on something great by doing that. That's how great things are found.
I
But
sp-
man, it's horrible.
I spent a year, and I filmed some of it, but I never released it because I never could. I get busy doing stuff and forget to really film it. But I spent a year with 2 5-gallon buckets and a little 10-gallon copper still that I built, going out to the woods every couple weeks. And I use the same mash bill and do an all grain mash in with the most primitive stuff that I had on hand, and then dump it into the bucket, and then leave the bucket cracked, and then just let wild yeast and whatever else would get in there infect it.
Right.
And it was about 50-50. It was about
Yeah.
50-50 whether it was going to work or not work. And when it worked extremely well. And it was a cool experiment. I learned a lot from it. But I'll tell you, you'll laugh at this. You know what my handicap is? I never spent any time in my life really making flavored, sweetened things until I knew I was going to Old Homestead. And I might have struck. If you want me to make an Aqua Regis from the 1600s, name a year and I can make it. You ask me to add sugar and flavor to something, and I am an
Right.
idiot.
Yeah. See, that's I did some bartending, so I'm kind of a little bit familiar with mixing drinks, but to me, that's just that's something that you do at the bar, not at the distillery, right? It's
Right.
just putting it in that bottle. It's hard for me to get that concept. It's
I'll,
like,
I'll tell
now,
you what,
shouldn't
on
I
the
just put my spirit in the bottle and then you mix it like that when you get it home? Or
on the
but it's
commercial side now, though, now like
yeah, that's what
in
people want. That's what
in
people want.
in the past, here's what I'll say. Even in bourbon country, because bourbon has fallen off a cliff. In the past year, it has changed. People who I can tell you for a fact a year or 2 years ago would have like frowned upon
Oh yeah,
anything sweetened. Not now, man.
this
Not
guy.
now.
I was that way 5, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Hell no.
Hmm.
But that's what people want, and you got
Yeah.
to give people what they want, and
Yep.
there's nothing wrong with a good sweet drink. I mean, I like them too,
Yeah.
but it's just I've never put them in a bottle that way. It's
Hmm.
always I made the spirit. You take the spirit, you mix it in a glass, and pat some ice in it, and that's your drink. And that's always
Yeah.
been the way to do it. But people want it bottled that way out of convenience. So they want it in a can or a bottle so they can take it and
Well, the cool
drink it
thing
on the
it's
go. And
the one cool thing I'll say it's done for me, and I know we'll talk about Homestead here in a little while, but I throw this in as a real quick thing. I love botanical spirits, and I also love old school European cordials like Strega and Chartreuse and
right,
Genepi. So it at least doing those flavored things gave me, and figuring out what I was doing and how many grams of sugar per liter gave me the knowledge to be able to confidently do something in that vein, which is something that I always wanted to learn anyways. I just never took the
Right.
time to do it,
Yeah,
and
that's something that I'm interested in learning is how is a lot of these old world distillates were
yeah,
made, and because that's just something that I don't know, and
yeah,
I'm always seeking knowledge on things that I don't know, and that's something that I've been trying to learn a little bit more,
yeah,
and
yeah,
like absinthe and ouzo and a lot of these drinks that
yeah,
a lot of
yeah.
people dig. There's a lot of mystique to ouzo and absinthe and uh,
Hmm.
and I guess the old uh, everybody talking about how you could trip off of it, and how that always intrigued me. That's kind of
Right. Well, it's uh, and then I know we talked about this in documentary too, but that was definitely a misconception. But now let me say
oh,
this.
absolutely. Didn't they actually outlaw wormwood for a while?
So they outlawed absinthe the world
Right,
over,
well, for
pretty
sure.
much, with the exception of Spain. So alpha thujone is the compound that the French wine industry went after when it came to absinthe, because they needed to displace absinthe to get wine back on top after the
Right,
phylloxera epidemic. But you can go to the store and buy a jar of sage oil right now that's got 50 times more alpha thujone in it than a bottle of absinthe will ever have. And while thujone has some physiological effects, specifically, it's a poison in high doses, deliriant as well as a liver toxin. But we're talking extremely high dosages.
right, yeah.
It won't make you trip. But now here's what's interesting. I have to state this. So here's a fun thing for those of you who are home distillers. If you ever become a legal distiller, sometimes when you say something, you have to be very careful what you're saying, especially on a public platform, because you don't know who's listening, and you have to occasionally make a distinction between who you are. So as Alan Bishop, a private citizen, and not Alan Bishop, the distiller at Old Homestead,
Right.
absinthe does have some interesting, potentially medicinal qualities. It does have depending on the botanicals and the load of botanicals that are in it, there is some lucidity to it. So the
Mm,
reason that the Bohemians loved it so much, and the artists in particular and the musicians loved it, is because you could have 3 or 4 glasses of absinthe, and by the time you luce it, it's at about 14% alcohol, so about like a strong wine. And because of the effects of many of the botanicals, you were drunk, but you were functional and you were aware that you were drunk. And so it's a very different sort of feeling than being, than having a couple shots of whiskey or whatever. And a lot of that has to do with the digestive action of some of the botanicals that are in there. Some of the potentially, depending on what's in it, you can have vasorestrictors or vasodilators, which is going to have an effect on your blood pressure.
mm.
Um, there's a lot of different ways that you can manipulate how absinthe will make you feel,
But,
uh,
I mean,
for sure.
isn't it a tincture of sorts? I guess when
Yeah.
you start dealing with
Yep.
botanicals and alcohol and
Yeah. Yeah.
leaching out essentials, oils from it. Yeah,
That's
it's a
that's what I
tincture, and there's definitely going to be some, you know,
always always say is Alan Bishop, the citizen. There, if the TTB and any other alcohol regulating agency in the world was not bought and paid for, and they were smart, they would understand that and this is probably not the best way to word the category, but there would be a category recognized still to this day as either functional alcohol or medicinal alcohol.
right, exactly.
And so that's overlooked, and it's unfortunate, because that has been a huge part of our history, going back to ancient Egypt and aromatized wines. That's where absinthe finds its roots, is in wine that was aromatized with wormwood.
Yeah,
So I
that's
got you
been
all
done.
kinds off track.
Yeah, well, hey man, that's what we do here. We start out with a simple question, and next thing you know, I'm way off on some tangent. So everybody's kind of used to that. I do get way off on tangents, and that's just what we love to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So you asked about Stolen Wolf as well.
Yeah. Well,
So
they're in Pennsylvania for those that don't know.
mhm. Yep. Yep.
No,
So Stolen Wolf is owned by Eric and Aviana Wolf, and two of I hesitate to even call them friends. They are family,
right,
and a lot of people use that word in a disingenuous way, and
right,
they I as you can tell, I sort of had deep feelings for those two. Uh, I mean that in the most sincere way that a person can possibly mean that. Like if you got to actually choose your family, and I think anybody in the world that ever met Avi and Eric would say this, they are the people that you would choose.
right,
And so Eric and I, we started talking several years ago on Distillers Talk, and then we hadn't met in person, never had a chance to. I talked to his mentor Dick Stoll a couple times on the phone back when you know that whole thing was new down there. I knew who Dick was from Michter's. Obviously, I got interested in him and Jerry Dalton, who was the only non-beam Jim Beam master distiller at about the
right,
same time. And I've always been interested in Pennsylvania. So my Wilson family on my mom's side, that are from Oneida, Kentucky, when they first came into the United States, they came through that area of Pennsylvania, and they settled there for a little while. And so I've always been interested in Pennsylvania's history as a distilling state because much like Southern Indiana, Pennsylvania, they really didn't let the Whiskey Trust own pretty much anything there because everything was tight. It was family owned, it was community oriented, it was farm oriented. And for a state that's considered northern, they certainly did a much better job than Kentucky did of keeping the carpetbaggers out of their business.
right.
And
The snake oil salesman.
I
And
have a
let me break
ton.
just for a sec. Somebody asked a question. Yes, we are going to do questions from comments, but we're at first we're going to go ahead and just kind of freelance and talk about,
Yeah.
Alan experience and all that. And then once we get done talking about that and Old Homestead and everything he wants to talk about, then we're going to field questions. So I like to do that first because, we get off on tangents and get, one. I'm more of a structure when it comes to this, and I'm kind of OCD about it. So I want to get all this out first because we can do the Q&A every time, but we don't get to pick Alan's brain and learn a little bit more about Alan and the history and some of these things, that we don't get every day. So
Yeah. So the long short is I really really respect the history of Pennsylvania and what they were doing, and also a lot of the settlers who came here to southern Indiana were the second and third sons of people who lived in Pennsylvania. Because if you were the second or third son, you didn't inherit anything from the father in their culture.
actually, wasn't Kentucky and Indiana all this considered part of Pennsylvania at one time?
So Kentucky was part of Virginia, and then
Virginia colony, yeah, and everything.
yep,
Yeah, that's
yep,
it.
and then Indiana was it was the beginning of the Indiana Territory running into the Louisiana Purchase. With me and my buddy Aiden, and then JJ, we get together. We call ourselves the Northwest Ordinance, is what we call
Right,
ourselves.
right,
But anyways, so went to got I'd been to Mount Vernon once before in 2017, I think it was, and then got the invite to come back a couple years ago in November and work on some rye whiskey. And Eric was going to be there, so it was going to be an opportunity to get to hang out with him. And took my buddy Brian Cushing, the Victorian Bar Room, down with us,
right.
and me and Eric, we really hit it off, and we were mashing in rye one day, and we'd kind of been
So
talking
this
back
is
and
how you all met when you were doing
yeah.
the absence show. Awesome, awesome.
Well, not the absence show, but the rye at Mount Vernon itself.
Oh, okay,
Um,
okay.
so and we're mashing in the rye down there at Mount Vernon, and at one point in time, so we've been, I'm a little bit of a prankster and a jokester, and so is he, and we're talking, and it gets real quiet for a minute, and he just looked up and he goes, "Man, you ever have that like moment of deja vu where you're like, yeah, I've been here with this person before?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah." So, and that's kind of where he and I started getting this idea of like, how can we work together? What can we do? So, of course, he and Avi have, Stolen Wolf, and that's a brand, and that's the distillery. But underneath Stolen Wolf, we now have this thing that we call Wolf and Wilson, which is, of course, named after my mother's maiden name
Right.
and that Pennsylvania history there. And so Wolf and Wilson will focus pretty much exclusively on this idea of colonial era or pre-colonial era spirits, staying true to the tradition of those spirits, but putting a modern spin on it. And what I mean by modern spin is the modern part is literally his column still in Thumper, which is set up quite a bit differently from Kentucky. I'm not a column still guy, but I've said this aloud before, and I think I gave some people a heart attack in the industry. If I were going to have a column, I'd copy Eric's to a T, and I wouldn't change anything on it. It would
Right.
be what it is.
Now,
So
is this kind of like a continuous column
it
setup, or
is a continuous column, but as opposed to like what you will see in Kentucky at most places, instead of on the column having a massive D flag at the top to drive proof and purity up, and then what they call a doubler instead of a thumper, which is flash distilling everything. This has a small D flag up top. The proof off of the column is right around, and you can vary it depending on that D flag.
right?
But Eric's coming off the column right around 100 proof, which is beautiful. You know,
That is, you know,
stripping pot.
it's so funny. Let me interrupt. It's so funny how most people chase the proof when they first start out.
Yeah.
I'm putting out 160. I'm putting out 170. I can turn this up and get 180 and all this. And it's like, you found a way to take all the flavor out of your liquor.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
It's like, if I can get mine, I want mine to come off lower and lower and lower. I try to
Mhm.
force mine to come out low. And sometimes it's tough to get it to come out. It's hard to get it to come out to 100.
That's
It's
it.
not
Yeah.
not easy.
Well, and that's the beauty of his rig. So coming off the column going to the thumper, he's right at 100, right? And
That's
then
amazing.
when he hits the thumper, so he can play that thumper also has three plates on it. They're not bubble caps though, they're just screen plates.
Right.
And so depending on if he's running any steam to the thumper or how hard he's running the D flag on the thumper, I mean, if he wanted to, he could chase proof, but he never does. So their average proof is, I think, right around 132, which is right at double pot
Perfect.
distilled proof.
Perfect.
And we've even run some stuff as low as 119, I think, just for fun. So it's very, and the other great thing is, listen, I'm not knocking anybody, but there's a difference between an operator and a distiller. Eric is not standing in front of a computer screen telling the computer what to do. He and Avi are and Jim Wolf, his dad, who I love to death. You guys need to get Jim on one of these shows. Jim is
Yeah.
hilarious. But they're turning the knobs. They're doing the things. They're there doing the actual work.
Well,
So
with this format, I can get like up to 10 people on here at a time. So maybe we can, work
yeah,
on something where we can get a bunch of these guys. If we could all get together and have y'all on and
yeah.
kind of meet up and talk. I'd love to host it and love to listen.
Well,
I mean, I just dig all this old historical stuff, man. I mean, I can't
Eric
get
would
enough of it.
Eric would be a great one to have on. If you ever want to do cider, Aiden Pemberton would be a good one. Jim Wolf, I don't think he'd do a whole show, but if Eric could get him come on for 10 minutes and tell the story about wrestling the bear, it,
Okay.
I can't even begin to tell you. But apparently there was a bear in Pennsylvania that traveled around and you could pay money to wrestle it.
Right.
And
Right.
both he and Dick Stoll both wrestled the same bear and had the same exact story. And it's just fantastic. But so the Wolf and Wilson stuff, what we'll do is we have one main mash bill. Now we are doing some other stuff. We just did basically what'll end up being a distilled spirit specialty with Paul Menta from Key West First Legal Rum Distillery. And what that was a document that we came across where they talked about how in early colonial America, when they couldn't get a hold of rum, one of the alternatives that was looked into but found to be lacking because there wasn't enough sugar was that they were actually pressing corn canes to try to
Right.
get sugar out of it, but nobody really followed through in it. So we thought, well, it's still a cool historic idea. We can do something like that. So we took molasses and we also took corn and we did a cook of the corn. Basically made a split rum slash corn spirit um, off of that as a hybrid, as a tribute to this sort of thing, and then used yeast strain that we actually captured from Mount Vernon, from out by the old abandoned mill pond, to ferment this with. And I think that's all going to end up for sale down at Key West. But the Wolf and Wilson project, there was a book that both Eric and I somehow we both had a copy of it. It
Someone
was
was asking in here not too long ago about using the juice from corn stalks. And I was like,
Hmm.
definitely something you could do if you can get starches and sugar out of it. It's
Just be
definitely
a lot.
doable.
Take a lot would be the only thing.
Yeah,
That's why we just went with regular corn, because you're still staying true to the spirit of what the project is, but you're also being logical.
right. They did corn cob too. Remember the old corn
Mhm.
cob jelly and shine?
Oh yeah, that was a big thing around here.
Yeah,
And corn cob wine, that's always been a big thing here.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so the main mash bill that we use, that we riff off of, remember I was talking about riffing like with music earlier,
Right.
is there was a book by a gentleman named Hans Frederick Geller, I believe was his name, and he was from York County, Pennsylvania, I believe. Uh, this area of Pennsylvania where Eric lives at, he's out Lidditz, Lancaster area. Those two or three counties right in that area, all of them at one point in time had 150 to 200 distilleries in each county. I mean,
Wow.
it's insane how many they had. But this guy had an account book because he was a shoemaker and distiller, as one does. And
Interesting.
this book, the Pennsylvania German Society republished it, and it's literally just an accounting book that has like people who owed him money, people he owed money, what they bought, and there's a lot of really neat stuff in there because you realize that
Yeah.
the guy's trading in and making a lot of spirits that you wouldn't think that he would have been for that time. But the other thing that was in the original copy of that book was a little pamphlet that he had gotten from somewhere, and the Pennsylvania Society, also the German Society, also republished that in the book, and it was basically how to make a profitable distillery. And this was in the late 1700s, I believe, that was published. And within that book, it gives the closest thing to truly historic colonial mash bills I've ever seen, because mash bills really were not a thing when it comes to percentages until much later on. So this is as close as I've ever seen, and I'll tell you exactly what it said. And we figured it out, by making an actual modern mash bill based on alcohol contribution. But it was 1 bushel of rye, 1 bushel of wheat, 1 bushel of rye malt, and 1 peck of oats. And so that's our historic Wolf and Wilson mash bill. And then we gathered yeast from two of the old distilleries down there that were just outside of Lidditz, Pennsylvania. And we used that. And we also used some cheese culture to get that up and going. And then we do variations on that. So far we have done, we have a white version that'll be released in the tasting room. We have one that has nothing else done to it, but just the standard mash bill. We didn't let the ferment go all the way dry. I think we actually ran it when it was like at 10-15 or so. And then we have a version that has apples infused into it, into the thumper. And then we have a version that has raisins infused into it. And then we have a version that has a bunch of citrus infused into it. And these
So
are
this
all
is going to
going
be Stoll and Wilson putting this out.
Wolf and Wilson.
Wolf and Wilson. Okay, I can't
Yep.
remember which
Yep.
one.
Yep.
Wolf
And
and
that'll be
Wilson. Awesome.
a Pennsylvania only thing, man. Pennsylvania only.
Yeah,
I
it's going to be tough to get some of that. I'm going to have to rely on you for that. I don't
yeah,
get up to
yeah.
Pennsylvania very often.
Man, I'll tell you what, if you ever get a chance to go to Lidditz, Pennsylvania, though, I'm not a town person, but that little town there, dude, when I was a kid, my little town was like this too, where like everybody knew everybody and waved at everybody. And this is a fairly decent sized town now, but it's the only decent sized town that I've been to where the crossing guard still waves at you. And if your window's down, that dude's going to ask you how your morning is going.
Yeah, I've been to Pennsylvania once. My freshman year of college in '81, my roommate had a girlfriend from uh, maybe Lancaster, somewhere in there. Anyway, so we drive up together, and there she's eloping, and they're going to get married. So he had no wheels, so I drove him up there, and we picked her up and drove back to Transy, and she stayed there in the dorm room with us for about half a semester, and they both ended up he dropped out, and I think they both got married and ran off.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was my only time in Pennsylvania. I've flown over it many times, but that was the only time I drove into it.
I love Lidditz, and then also And I think Eric and I are going to do something with the Eichelberg Distillery out there, which is another historic distillery at Dill's Tavern out by where Jimmy Jack's is at, actually. Um, the thing I love about going to Eric's is you don't ever know, because it's so close to everything on the East Coast, right? Everything's pretty much within a couple hours. So no matter how quiet I am when I'm out there, somehow people find out that I'm out there, and you never know who's going to show up.
Right.
Just randomly, either like JJ or Jimmy Jacks or Amanda or whoever just decides to randomly show up because it's close to
Right.
everything. So,
Right.
which is nice. And
So I forgot JJ's from there too, isn't he?
yeah, I think he's originally from Ohio, but
Oh, is he?
yeah, he spent most of his time in Pennsylvania, I do believe. So, and Paul Menta's from Pennsylvania as well. So, Laura, American Whiskey History, she's just a couple hours up the road from there, and yeah, I enjoy it. It's man, I try to go out there once in the spring and once in the fall, just like Mount Vernon. And I'll tell you this, dude, that's those doing that, both those projects has been my reset. Something when it comes around, I know it's time. Right? And
Right.
go out there, getting a little different mindset. I come back home and I'm ready to rock and roll when I get back here. So
Definitely good refresh of the mind, clearing things.
mm-hmm. And
So
then
yeah, I think Amanda, she's from up there.
she is. Yep.
Yeah.
And then
Amanda.
Mount Vernon, I'll talk on it real quick too. So
yeah, let's talk about Mount Vernon.
There. So that's the other one I love going to. So here's the other irony. So my Bishop side of the family and my Butler side of the family, when they came into the United States, they came directly through Alexandria, Virginia. And if you drive around,
mine came through Virginia.
Yep. If you drive around Alexandria, so we were descendants of Captain James Bishop. You still see the Bishop name a lot in that area. So going to both of them, sort of a little bit of like a homecoming across a couple generations. And I always tell all those guys at both places, like, I always feel like, being from the Midwest and being from Southern Indiana, Hoosier occupied Northern Kentucky, like, I got to go back east and bring something back because everybody left east and took all their stuff west and nobody ever brought anything back. So I try to go out there and help them, but so Mount Vernon, that's for me, man, that's the altar of distillation for the United States. And anybody who is a distiller should want to try to go there at some point in time and be a part of it. It's Steve Bayshore. This is a thing that I definitely need to make sure I put in here. So for as awesome as Mount Vernon is, as absolutely amazing as it is to walk in the footsteps of the 6 enslaved men who were there, as well as Anderson, as well as Washington, all the history there, to be able to go to the grounds of Mount Vernon, all that sort of stuff, to walk on hallowed ground. Steve Bayshore, who's the director of operations there, director of historic trades, he's a huge part of what makes that place special, because Steve is a curator of knowledge and a curator of friends, bar none. And he'll, in the months leading up to going out there, I'll talk to him and be like, yeah, my buddy such and such is coming out, and he's he or she's does this and this, and you probably really be interested in this, and make sure you get a chance to talk to him. And I've met some of the coolest people in the world. Really good friend that I made, Tim. He's a chocolate historian, right? I don't even know I'd be interested in the history of chocolate.
Wow.
Damn if I'm not, though.
The Hershey historian. All right.
Well, he's not even Hershey's. He's colonial chocolate, dude. He and a bunch of other these guys got hired by Mars to come up with a colonial chocolate recipe and write a book about how chocolate was processed at that time. Right. And so we're making a cordial out of that chocolate now at Old Homestead. And man, you meet so many interesting people there, and it's just, you don't get those, you're not in those situations with active distilling very often where it's actually still a communal thing. And out there, it's definitely a communal thing. Everybody's throwing in and doing their thing, right? Everybody smells bad. Everybody's usually got some kind of hangover, that you're working through. And I love it. I absolutely love it. I wouldn't trade it for nothing.
That's interesting. The chocolate making and the chocolate cordials. So have you done a lot with chocolate? I mean, there's a concentrate. Now I know this is probably kind of fingernails on chalkboard thing to somebody that uses real chocolate and does historical making of chocolate. But there's a concentrate that you can buy that some people say it does pretty good and it carries over pretty well.
I've
Um,
heard that. I've heard that. I've
trying to
not
think
tried
of the
that, but now I have done. Few years ago on my Tennessee Thumper. So I had the very first Tennessee Thumper. I had a bypass on it. I had Rick build for me years ago, and so I did. It was a cherry brandy that I made into a chocolate cherry uh, split. It was a brandy basically, is what it was. Cherry and sugar, and then in the Thumper I did a shit ton of dark chocolate and then cinnamon and nutmeg and cayenne. And it turned out a really nice white spirit. It carried over pretty heavily. I think I actually did a milk chocolate version too. I did that with those caramello candies, and that was a nightmare to clean, is what that was.
yeah, this is Goodman's. It's called Goodman's Dark Chocolate Extract,
Huh.
and I've told that it does really well with carrying over for when you want
Interesting.
to
Yeah.
infuse with some chocolate flavor.
I've had a few jars of white liquor from people that they swear up and down they did chocolate malt in, and I wonder if maybe that's actually what they're doing instead of chocolate malt.
Probably.
Because you can get some chocolatey notes out of chocolate malt, but not like that.
Right.
So,
Yeah. We've all seen those. How did you
mhm.
pull that flavor? Well, it's what came right off the tap. Yeah.
Right,
Okay.
sure,
Yeah, I've seen
sure.
a lot come off the tap in my days. It's never been quite like
Uh,
that.
no, no,
Yeah.
no. Yep, I know I'm not the smartest person here, but I'm also not an idiot.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know,
Yep.
I can pull sweaters over my head, but not the wool over my eyes.
Yep.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was pretty deep. But
So
yeah, it's that Goodman. So I'm gonna have to give that a shot sometime and see what
yeah,
kind of infuse me.
may have to play with that. So the other thing I'll mention on Mount Vernon real quick, two little things that came out of Mount Vernon in the past couple of years that have been good for me for my spirit. So the first thing is I got to distill apple brandy at Mount Vernon, and of all the times I'd ever been out there, that was like the one thing. Like, please,
Right,
Steve, invite when you because they don't make it very often, right?
right,
And
right, right.
apple brandy's my thing, and so me and Aiden Pemberton, who's a part of what we call the Unholy Apple Alliance with me and Brian and Eric, got to go and make some apple brandy at Mount Vernon. And then Steve invited me to create the mash bill for the first ever American whiskey that they made at Mount Vernon. And Eric and Aiden were a part of that, as was Amanda and Paul Menta and a lot of other really, really special people. And so I always, when I come back home, my wife, Kim, she'll go, "How was it?" I was like, "Oh, I got to go make whiskey for George Washington." I mean, how
Yeah,
do
I mean that's the
you know?
that's like Wimbledon, of
Yeah, dude.
distilling. It's just like
Yeah.
there's not a better
Oh,
place or honor to do it. It's like
oh yeah. Yeah, it really is such a special occasion, and so many personalities come through there. Guy, Big Tom Gale. I love Big Tom Gale. He runs a restaurant. Oh man, I can't think of the name of it. He's gonna kill me if he hears this. But Big Tom sounds a lot like Foghorn Leghorn when he talks. Like
right.
sounds just like him. Like I tell you, boy.
Yeah,
Oh man, he cracks me up. We went to his restaurant and Virtue Feed and Grain, that's it. And he put on a special whiskey tasting for us all. And he goes, I brought y'all some special oysters. I had them dug up right out of my own oyster bed for you today. I thought, who the hell has their own oyster bed? What's going on
right.
here? Wears the Tennessee bow tie and everything, man. It's
Oh man,
phenomenal.
yeah.
Love
My
them.
family loved oysters when we were. My grandparents' house burnt down growing when I was a child, and I remember when they came in and dug the foundation to put the basement into the house that my mom and dad built. They ran into like a huge pile of oyster shells that they had I guess there was a pit there that they just put
Yep.
these oyster shells over the years, and
Yep.
it was massive. They actually had to enlarge the size of the house because it was just, you know, they it's going to be hard to really fill in that area. So they had to make some changes, but it was crazy the amount of oyster shells that
Yeah.
they dug up from that. Now, oysters used to be a big thing.
Big
Mussels
deal.
and oysters were
Yeah.
huge back in the
Well,
day.
here's a fun distilling history thing for you about Southern Indiana and the distilling complexes here. I have yet to find any of the old still sites. You know, that there may not even be a building. You always find something though, right? I can always
Right,
find bricks or part of the furnace or whatever. I have yet to find a single one that does not have a pile of mussel shells because they use them to control pH.
right. And
Every
I share that knowledge with everybody. You know, crushed oyster shells is a
Yep.
wonderful thing. You know, boil them, clean them up, boil them good, and let them dry out. Put them in a, uh,
Yep.
muslin or some, what is it? My mind, I'm losing it, man. I forget
Cheesecloth.
it. Yeah, cheesecloth. Simple things.
Yeah.
It took me 5 minutes to come up with funnel the other day. It's like,
Oh, I do. I
it's
do it
getting
on one
bad,
piece at a
man.
time.
Yeah, it's getting bad. But yeah,
I was fun.
just wrap up a bag of crushed oyster shells and throw it in there, and
Yeah.
you know it doesn't. It's not a quick pH adjustment. So if that's something you want to do, you know you probably better serve with pickling lime or something like that. But
Yep.
as a buffer, if you throw it in at the same time you do your yeast, as it drops, it will, eat
Yeah.
away at that calcium carbonate and help neutralize the acids as they build up.
Oh,
You know, there's
it was.
lots of
No,
acids.
I don't think anything ever made me feel more smart in my life than a couple years ago, as while we were working on the Spring Mill project, and they. So before we can do any work to the building, they had to have the archaeologists come in and take a look at the floor, and so they dug up little sections and stuff, and I guess they thought they were going to find something big. I'm like, hey, look, anything of value is out of here, guys. Like, you're not going to find anything. And they kept finding little pieces of oyster shell. And they're not, I'm just sitting and watching them. They're not listening to anything I have to say, despite the fact that I've been a distiller my whole life.
Right.
And they just kept saying, well, I don't know why these oyster shells are here. I mean, we're close to the creek. It's probably natural deposits. And I said, guys, if it's natural deposits, how come they're all broken and they're the same size? I can tell you
Yeah,
exactly what it is.
that's funny. That's hilarious.
I know 100% exactly what it is because the same things that we do now are things that they were doing then, you
Yeah,
know? So,
yeah. The old crushed oyster shells. It's a great pH, buffer. I guess you could consider it a buffer, and you can buy the bottles of 5.2 or whatever,
yeah,
but you're just overpaying for crushed oyster shells is all you're doing. It's
that's all you're
calcium
doing.
carbonate. Yeah,
That's it.
it's good
Yep.
stuff. So when you run into pH issues, you know, what do you use? Do you use I know you probably don't use baking soda, but
I
pickling
have.
lime or
I've used baking soda at home
right,
in the past just because it's what
right,
I had. If it's a big pH issue, then yes, pickling lime. So, professionally, I've only had one issue with pH ever, but I'm gonna mention it to you here in a second because it's something that people should be aware of, and it was something that I was not aware of. And this is another example of sometimes I put my shirt on backwards. Um, so typically, it's going to be pickling lime, but most of the time, I try to maintain as clean of my yeast cultures as what I can with good symbiotic bacteria, and probably 99.999% of the time, I have no problems whatsoever.
right,
All right. So now here comes the fun part. So I get to Old Homestead, very first fermentation. And bear in mind, I've been making the sunflower stuff at home for years now, right?
right. That's the sunshine. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm going to be Mr. Big Shot, right? I'm going to go in and, like, first time out the bat, I'm going to make a couple mashes and they're going to run off awesome. And I got all my yeast ready and I got everything ready to go. And so I thought, well, I'm gonna, I've been inverting sugar at home because they're sugar shines. I'm
right,
completely honest about what they are. That's exactly what they are. So I thought, well, I'll put the sugar in the water and I'll put it in the still and I'll heat it up and I'll add a little bit of the acid and this and that and the other. And I check my pH on my water before I add it, and I check it after I add the acid, and the sugar
Now,
and
do you use an
everything.
acid blend or just straight citric? Or
So a little bit of citric
yeah,
is what I was using. So because fairly alkaline water there at Homestead. Huge lake, a lot of limestone in the area. Harder limestone than Kentucky. It's more building limestone than soft limestone. But anyways, long short of it is, I get everything mashed in, get the yeast in there. The next day I come in, it's running beautifully. Like it's the most gorgeous mash ever. And I'm thinking, yeah, you know what you're
yeah,
doing. You're doing a fine job.
yeah.
I come in the next day and it is stalled bigger than shit. And I test the pH on it and it's setting at 2.9.
No,
And I'm like, okay, like this is here. There's a new one. Like, what's going on here? Is this bacteria? What's happening? Nothing smells off, right? So I played around, ground up a bunch of oyster shells into real fine powder, brought the pH back up to like 3.5 because I knew my yeast would take that and that wouldn't
right,
be a
right.
problem. It kicks back off. Next day, same problem. Back down to
Wow,
2.9. It's stalled
wow.
out. This goes on for about 5 days on this first batch, and I keep bringing it back up with pickling lime after that, right? And I finally get it almost finished, and I run it. But meanwhile, I've set these other batches, and I'm having the same problem, and I'm going, "What in the hell is like?" I literally lost like 2 weeks of sleep just laying in bed, just and doing the
Right. I
stupid,
mean,
yeah, doing the stupid thing that you do to yourself when you have a situation like this, where you know you're overthinking it, but you can't put your thumb on it, and you start questioning yourself, and you go, "What?" Clearly, I don't know what the hell I'm doing, despite all my years of
right.
experience.
Yeah. It's and it couldn't have happened at a worse time.
Oh.
Yeah.
So what I figured out is the water that we have at Patoka is absolutely gorgeous for fermentation. It's absolutely perfectly in range by the time you add your grain and everything. It really doesn't need anything. It might be a little high. It might set 5.9, even 6.0 instead of 5.5.
Right.
But because of the type of limestone that we have and the way that that water chemically works, if you do anything to buffer it at all, it drops all buffering capacity completely
Wow. I thought it
and
was going to be
will
like iron or something like that.
nope,
That you would have.
nope. It's all just straight up. If you do anything to buffer, anything at all, going up or down, it will drop all capacity to buffer.
Wow.
So I gave up on the inverting sugar and adding acid. And I was like, you know what? Nope, this is just back to the shack. Just straight up basics, water into the barrel, melt the sugar, put the grain in, and let's roll. So,
Yeah.
yeah, but I'll tell you what, man, that was probably, there's only been 2 issues in my entire career that have ever done me that way. That was one of them. The other one was a few years ago. Breeze switched out their distiller's malt from being a 6-row to a 2-row, and they didn't tell anybody.
Wow.
And the problem is, if you're running with no enzymes and you're relying directly on malt,
Yeah. Yeah.
two
It's
2-row, even if it's high protein 2-row, does not have enough beta, and so everything was finishing at like 10-15, and
yeah. It's
I just banging my head against the wall.
yeah. Yeah. It's like 140. It's Lintner like 140 versus 170.
Hmm.
It's not. It's a big difference when you're
Well, now
depending on the
they're
endogenous
they're
enzymes.
their DP on their analysis is, it's like a 230, 240, but the problem is it's all alpha. There's no beta. There's
Oh
no
yeah.
beta because and the reason I didn't tell anybody, I finally got to the bottom of it because I called them about it. And they're like, well, everybody uses enzymes anyways. And I'm like, well, clearly not all of us use enzymes.
Yeah. No, some people still like the malt. Depending on the
Yeah.
malt.
Yeah. You might want to let somebody know when you're going to make that switch.
Yeah,
So,
I kind of preach nowadays to kind of use a little bit of both. Just kind of scale back your, exogenous or exogenous
yeah.
enzymes but include them just to help get a great,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
There's
conversion.
nothing
It
wrong with it.
doesn't hurt. It's not going to affect your flavor.
No,
Don't need as much, So
I
put a
just,
little bit in there.
I tell people on enzymes, is the thing that I've told them from the get go is this, and this is one thing I believe to be true and demonstratively true. Just don't use them at the recommended 100% rate. Pull them back
Right.
to about 90% or so that you're not breaking down the cellulose. You'll get a lot cleaner product, and there's nothing wrong with it. I I guess because I do this for a living, I like to make whiskey without enzymes. Just because it becomes a little bit more of a challenge, right? Like
Yeah.
if you love to paint, but you have to go in every day and paint the same picture, it gets a little a little monotonous. So right now at Homestead, we are using enzymes, and the reason for that is because we're running all electric. Now the elements are in the jacket, so it has nothing to do with scorching. It has to do with figuring out the range of temperature with the equipment
Right.
and how that changes. So we've almost cycled through all of our mash bills, and I just told Tyler yesterday or today, I can't remember. We get done with his mash bill, which is next, because he's gonna get to make his own mash bill there, which is awesome.
Cool.
I've never been able to offer that to anybody before. Um, we'll go back through everything again, and this time we're going to try to do it without enzymes. We'll have them on hand if we need them, if we miss, but we're going to try to get through this next cycle, zero enzymes.
Yeah.
So
That's the best way to do it if you can. But it's uh, what are your thoughts on pectic enzymes? Do you still use a lot of pectic enzymes? Now I know you mentioned the cellulose and I know pectic enzymes help break those down like an invertase and other help break down some of that cellulose, and I guess that's why you get more heads
it
when you
is,
when
and
you use them.
it ups your methanol content as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I don't usually use pectic enzyme. I've not ever run into a situation where I thought that I had to have it.
Right.
I will tell you sometimes on fruit mashes, especially if the fruit is just a hair bit.
Peach. They do so much good with peaches though. It's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm amazed how
Hmm.
you can have such a mush of peach pulp and
Right.
put in some pectic enzyme. The next day it's water.
Hmm.
It's liquid. There's not a bit of pulp there. It eats it all up. It's amazing. But at the same time, yeah, it makes it headsy and it does have an impact on flavor.
Yeah.
So I'm probably going to cut back on that because
So
the cellulose, eating the cellulose is what increases the methanol.
Yep.
That's basically a wood
Absolutely.
alcohol. Cellulose is
Yep.
how you make wood alcohol.
Yep. So
So
what I do instead is say like with apple brandy, like the apple mash we're making right now. Um, what I will sometimes do if like those apples are just commercial apples because apples haven't come on here in Indiana yet. So what I'll do instead of pectic enzyme is I'll actually use a little bit of glucoamylase to break everything down. And so what you're doing there instead of breaking down the pectin is you're breaking down whatever starches are still left in the apple from being a little bit underripe.
right,
And it's that seems to really enhance the aroma of less than favorable culinary apples, right? Because the culinary apples aren't great to distill with to start with, most of them. And that glucoamylase really seems to up that
yeah,
factor
I like
a
using
lot.
glucose. I actually use that my watermelon brandy that I've got going right now that I have a little lacto on that a little earlier than I wished. But
Yeah, yeah. That's we talked about doing some watermelon this year. I don't know. We'll see. There's the county just north of here. They grow a lot of watermelons. There's a place out there you can buy them for cheap, cheap, cheap. And I
yeah,
might. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know. It's one of those things with the distillery. Like it's at a tourist location, so I'm positive we can sell it. I just don't know. I don't know. We'll see. I've got a lot of. I'm going to have a lot of products as it is, so it might not be. I don't know. At some point, somebody's gonna be like, you need to calm your ass down a little bit and stop making so many different things."
yeah. That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Also about we started out with the Copper and Kings,
Uh huh.
and then we never made it to French Lick. We kind of got off on a little
Yeah.
bit of tangent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is Old Homestead the first time that you've had full, reign of creativity, or did they give you a little bit of did they loosen the reins on you there at French Licks a little bit?
So
I know
it
with your brandy, I'm pretty sure they had to, but
hey, Copper and Kings, it was that I didn't get to make hardly any real decisions there, other than if I was creating something that they asked me to create.
right,
That was one of the learning experiences. Is uh, there's probably something to be said for working for people who had money in South Africa during apartheid.
right,
So, um, So at French Lick, it was much more open as far as creativity. So the rules at French Lick, and I got along extremely well with the original owner, John Doty, and I really liked John. He and I butted heads over some stuff, but I understood John. I could
That's
work
yeah,
with him. But that company suffers a little bit from the second generation curse, and
yeah,
I hope they can find their way through it, is what I will say. But because I love that place. I tell my wife and my friends all the time, much like Jack Sparrow, I think of Spirits of French Lick as my Black Pearl. So,
right,
and one way or the other, one of these days I'll have that Black Pearl. I don't know how, but I'll have it. And so yeah, I had pretty much creative freedom there. But what I did was, so I knew I was up against double handicap. Handicap one was, that I came from Copper and Kings, and so the bourbon community didn't take me seriously. And handicap two was that I was running a distillery that is in the backyard of bourbon, but it's on the wrong side of the river, and Hoosier
right,
occupied northern Kentucky. So I created this rule, which was really, in hindsight, and it was good for me. In hindsight, though, I painted myself in the corner, and the rule was as follows. So everything that we make has to be either grain or fruit, water and barrel, and nothing else ever.
right,
So keep it as pure as what I could. And then I set the goal. And if you go and you look, we weren't the first. Well, we might have been. I don't know. If we weren't the first, we were one of the very first craft distilleries, and I mean like within the first five, that was consistently releasing bottled and bond products, because I knew that still had some levity to it at the time.
right,
I literally picked the hardest route that I could to create everything for Spirits of French Lick, and I absolutely loved it. And it gave me discipline and made me have to focus and sort of narrow my field of vision. Because how do you push something like bourbon with as many regulations as it has into a direction that's different, but yet can still get the attention of, for lack of a better word, the bourbon snobs. And it worked. I don't know how or why it worked, but it worked. And it worked extremely, extremely well, to the extent that there was a 3 or 4 year period where we sold between, I don't even know bulk product, I couldn't tell you, but I know single barrels because I headed that program up. There was a 3 or 4 year period where we sold between 350 and 400 single barrels a year, every
awesome.
year, for a tiny little distillery on the wrong side of the river. So
That's awesome.
so that was when I came to Old Homestead. I wanted all that off the table, because Homestead is much more. It's in line with everything that happened in the Black Forest, uh, more so than what Spirits of French Lick was in a lot of ways. But it's also, I always say that sort of the motto for French Lick was respect the grain. The motto here is, preserving tradition but pushing the envelope. And so what I wanted with Old Homestead was, I wanted a distillery that represented what homestead distilling looked like, but also represents, what the hell would a home distillery nowadays look like if money and space weren't so tight? And so that's exactly what we've created, is that space. So I wouldn't say it's a complete 180 from Spirits of French Lick. It's just, it's not the same direction. And I don't typically repeat myself. The only repeatable thing that I've carried throughout my career so far between all three is number 2 charred oak barrels and one single mash bill, which is the one that I created when I was 15, which is 60% corn, 17 wheat, 13 oats, and 10% caramel malt. But I've done it with different variations on the grain and yeast at all three places. So,
Right. So you haven't changed much on your apple brandy, have you?
well, I did, because the apple brandy at French Lick, I never could get them to let me do apple mash brandy.
Right.
Um, so we were using commercial juice
Right. Well, yeah,
from a.
I've heard it takes around 22 pounds of apples to make a gallon of juice. Does that sound right?
That's probably pretty close. That's probably pretty damn close. I can tell you that it takes about 3 bushels of apples to make 1 gallon of brandy.
Right.
So without adding sugar, obviously,
Right. Right.
which there's an interesting thing there too for those who don't know on the legal side. So TTB, another example of them not quite getting it. But so if you're in a legal distillery in the United States and you want to make apple brandy and you're going to ferment it in the distillery, you are not allowed to add sugar to it to capitalize it. But if you go to a winery and you buy finished wine from the winery and the winery added sugar to that apple wine, you can bring that into your distillery and it's considered apple brandy.
Interesting.
And that's
Funny how that works.
a weird little thing there.
Yeah,
Huh?
little loophole. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
So, and
so
anybody oh,
with the apple, to bring up, generally for me, I get about a 1040 with apples. Now,
yep.
do you just reduce that like you would a maple or a watermelon juice or anything else, and just reduce it to cook off the water to increase your gravity, or is that what
You can do it that way. So the beauty of what we do is that we can run solids and everything. So I can run damn
Oh, yeah.
near a solid state
Right.
fermentation in those barrels with very little added liquid. So the thing is, what you'll find is not only will you get a lower yield, but you're also going to get a lower offtake proof, which is I'm fine with that completely, just from an aroma standpoint. Now,
Right.
from a commercial distillery standpoint, it is much easier for us to pay the winery to make apple mash for us or apple wine for us,
Yeah.
and then buy it from them. So what will probably happen, and anyone who's making apple brandy on any scale commercially, and there's not many of us, if they tell you that they're not adding sugar, they either have more money than brains, or they're not making their own apple brandy.
Yeah.
Because as you just said, the alcohol content's really low. So my preference is, sometimes you have to make compromise, right? So what I like to do is I like to lay down some barrels that are completely non-capitalized, very, very heavily, aromatized from the apples. And then I don't mind to lay down some barrels that have also been capitalized during fermentation, and then I can blend and sort of meet the best of both worlds. And and the thing is, no one should ever feel bad about that either, because I can tell you from the myriad of accounts that I've read about Southern Indiana, almost every account of making apple mash brandy that I've ever read, and you'll find this over in northern France too. The French won't admit to it, but they do it. So they would often add sorghum or maple syrup over here in order to raise their gravity,
Right.
because otherwise it's not worthwhile for even just the firewood you're going to use to run the still at the time. So
Yeah, it just makes it more economically feasible.
Yeah.
It as a business decision. Sometimes you have to, make certain,
yeah,
exceptions and for business and to get the quantity up. And
you,
without
you gotta
really.
you got to make the root beer liqueur to pay the light bill to do the
That's right.
cool thing you want to do with the weird botanicals from your garden.
That's right. Yeah, yeah. You got to do something. And heck, a lot of people don't realize it, but there's a. I think was it Rabbit Hole and some of the others that they actually opened their distillery before their stills were even producing and
It's
did blends.
very common.
Yeah,
Very
it's
common.
very common to do. So
Yeah.
there's no shame in that. It's
No,
what you got to do
no.
to make money.
And we did that. We did that too for Old Homestead. So I was consulting for these guys before I ever got on over there. And so what we did is we went to this little distillery just east of Indianapolis called Moondrops. Really great little distillery. They make really nice. They do a lot of single pass bourbon.
Right.
So they're running a little hybrid column pot. I think it's a 4 or 5 plate. I think they're pulling proof about 135 or so on single pass. So I laid out mash bills for them, sourced grain from Sugar Creek, which is where we get ours. We use almost all Indiana grain, and then provided yeast to them. And then I would go up every few weeks and check quality and watch distillations. And now here's another crappy Indiana thing. So Indiana had a massive temperance movement that was very closely aligned with what they used to call peace Democrats. So there's still a lot of weird prohibition laws. There's a lot of anti-alcohol sort of stuff here, despite the fact that we're in the top 5 drinking states in the United States, which is crazy.
Wow.
That
has to be per capita. Yeah,
Yeah, I suggest it's probably all them northern counties up there in the wintertime is my
yeah,
guess.
man.
So, but long and short of it is with the artisan distillery bill, here's what sucks. So now I'm setting on 3 and 4 year old bourbon, American whiskey, rye whiskey, malted rye whiskey, and single malt whiskey. And because I technically didn't distill it in the distillery, I cannot bottle that and sell it to you in the tasting room
Right,
unless it's blended 60/40.
right.
Um,
Well, I
unless
can
I
think of worse problems to have, Alan.
I don't
Yeah,
know, man, that money flow thing gets to be a if I could just put some bourbon out there right now and get some money
yeah,
flow
it's tough.
rolling, that would be
Yeah.
helpful for
Well, that's the
sure.
hardest thing. It's hard to get into the bourbon business because, the first 3 or 4 years,
Yep.
you're not turning anything out.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
that's why you have to really depend on, a
Yeah.
lot of the other, clear liquors and gins and
And
vodkas and, things that
now
you can
now
straight produce and flavored.
with the bourbon bubble and the overproduction and everything too, it's even worse, and it's a race to the bottom. That's why we're not. So even the bourbons that we have for Moondrops, we're probably going to modify those and make
Yeah.
them into American whiskeys.
I heard
We're
that Republic National Distributors is pulling out of California.
it wouldn't surprise me.
That's huge.
I'll tell you something interesting. I can't say who or where or why or how, but I can tell you that someone that I highly, highly respect and hold in high esteem and consider a very good friend, he has made a hell of a deal on a distillery that just went under, and maybe a couple of others. And there may be a single person in the United States in charge of 29,000 barrels of whiskey between 5 and 10 years old right now. It's going to be a race to the
Probably
bottom.
Steve. I mean, how many
No,
does he do over there at Wilderness, man? I mean,
no, no.
he's top 10, isn't he? In
Yeah,
bourbon production
they're
for
up
sure.
there. They're
Yeah,
up
he's
there.
top 10 for sure.
hmm
That's awesome.
It's crazy. It's not. A lot of stuff still hasn't hit the news. It just makes the rounds within the industry, and
Yeah,
it's gonna get real interesting. I would not want to be a mid-sized producer right now, is what I'd say.
yeah.
And some of the big producers are probably shitting their pants pretty heavy too. So
Well, a lot of people, have big interest to get in the industry, and I'm like, you really not only have to know your shit, you have to be a businessman as well.
you do, you
And
do,
there's so much to it, and there's so many restrictions
yeah,
and limitations. Like what we're talking about. And
yeah,
what Steve did with Tim. Tim coming in
yeah.
there not documenting anything. No, you have to
Nope,
document every pound of sugar, bro.
all of it. Yeah.
Everything. And and people come to me and they're like, why don't you do it? And I'm like, brother, have you seen how many auctions there are out there for distillery products? There are always so many going out of business. It keeps these
What's
auctioneers in bread and butter, man. I mean, they're making so much money. Some of this equipment's been sold 4 or 5 times.
What's interesting is if you go back and listen to Distillers Talk, probably as early as 2020, I was telling Christy on the show back then, and a lot of our guests, I said, no, this bourbon boom thing, they're counting on foreign markets and population growth, which doesn't exist. I said they think it's going to go on forever. I said there's going to be an equal and opposite reaction to this, and it's coming sooner than people think, and
uh,
it has.
I'm gonna put
And
the link up here for you guys for the Distillers Talk on YouTube. Y'all need to go listen to some of those episodes as well.
the
Check
interesting
that
thing
out.
too is like the last
Are you
year and a
you're
half.
not making those anymore, are you? Or do you
We
still do?
we will be. We sort of took a little bit of a break just
Yeah, I've
because
seen the hiatus. Those
we were at that for so long and did so many episodes, and
it's tough.
then
Yeah.
starting the new distillery, and then Christy and her boyfriend Mark from Old Carter. Of course, Old Carter just went through a whole. Mark went through a divorce, and so he got his company back, and so he's trying to get that up and going. But yeah, we have plans to get back into that by this fall.
Yeah, I enjoyed listening to it.
I
Actually, my first episode, I had my name Distillers Talk, and I'm like, that sounds kind of familiar. But why does that sound familiar to me? And I Googled it, and I'm like, fuck, that's Alan's. I should have known better. So I changed it that day. Distillers Chat. I went back, and I think I changed the first episode back to Distillers Chat.
I appreciate it because unlike some people, Rigsby, with your Still Talking Institute of
Yeah, I noticed that
Distilling,
too. You know, everybody's wanting to get on the education bandwagon all of a sudden, you know, and I'll take a little bit of credit for that. I guess they see somebody doing a little good with something, and all of a sudden they want to get on that bandwagon, and it's like, yeah, come on, guys.
Fire up that AI.
Yeah, man. You'll need it. Oh, it's funny.
No,
I love those guys, man. I can't dog them. You know,
I love them too, but I'm gonna give them shit because of
all
the names, all the names you could have picked, Rigsby. Like,
yeah,
you didn't think that somebody, you know.
Actually, I think they had Distillers Institute, and then I think somebody said something. I think they took the Distiller Institute part out of it, because I think somebody might have said, "Well," I think that's been taken maybe by 2 or 3 people already. So,
Still Talking Distillers Talk. Distilling Institute of Distilling.
Yeah.
You know, here's what's funny, and I say this because Rigsby knows me and we're friends. So when I saw it, I didn't even think anything of it. But then I had people blowing me up, like, "Did you see what Rigsby's doing?" I'm like, I'm pretty sure, like, he didn't do this. This is not out of malice. This
right. Yeah. You know, and I did the Distiller Talk thing. I didn't even think anything about it, and I thought, you know, that does sound familiar. Maybe I should Google this, you know, because I don't want to copy somebody or step on some toes. And then the second I did, I'm like, fuck, that's Alan's. I immediately changed it. You know?
There's been a few people that I know have purposely bitten on my stuff over the years, and the thing is, you'll never hear me say their name because they're not worth my time.
Right.
Not worth my time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's a few people in the industry, you know, I won't say their names. Some people will on the shit show, and they like all that drama, bringing that shit up, bringing them on there, and I hate it. Can't stand it. I'm so glad I missed last Saturday and missed all that shit. You know, I love getting on there and cutting up and talking shit and having a good time and drinking with them, but when that kind of drama starts, man, it's like I'll get real fucking quiet. You know, I can't stand it. I can't deal with it.
It's not worth it. There's too many other things.
Yeah, I've got so much other shit to worry about real in my life than to deal with that stupid shit. I'm like, that's just, it's juvenile. I can't.
It's funny too, because
it is funny. It is.
You'll see a little bit of it in the legal industry, but they're a little more quiet about it. But I see it a lot with, you know, like if you have Ghosts, You Have Everything podcast, and like some of the stuff Kim does with tarot readings and stuff. Like she'll show me some of the drama or some of the things that like somebody on TikTok is saying or whatever.
Right.
And I told her the other day, she goes, "Well, what do you think that's about?" And I said, I think these bitches need to ride some more bicycles. That's what needs to
Yeah.
Go get it out of your system, man. Go get on a bicycle and get it out.
Yeah. So did you replace your pedal?
I did. I found me some fancy Walmart pedals.
Yeah.
I ain't high class.
So. I saw that pedal and I got so much enjoyment out of seeing it and stuff like that. I don't know how many shins. Actually, I've got pedal marks on my shins right now. Let's get my fat ass leg up here.
Yeah, I see that.
Pedal mark right on my shin. And I thought about that immediately. I'm like, yeah, look them up.
Yep. It's I've enjoyed the bicycle thing to go along with the distillery and all that stuff. It's I don't know. I think here's the thing I'll say to people that I think that maybe your audience will appreciate in a way. So I love distilling and I love the distilling industry, but the distilling industry doesn't necessarily love anyone, and it's not necessarily always an easy or fun industry, because there's a lot that goes into it that people don't realize or they don't see. And I'm not talking like physical labor. I'm talking about
behind
stress
the scenes,
and drama. Yeah. And then there's also a lot of me and Eric call it like our wives are distillery widows. You know what I
Right,
mean? Because
right.
you're busy doing these things that you have to do. And so there's a lot of like, it's easy to find escapism because you're around alcohol all the time. And I've never ever had a problem setting down a bottle and not drinking. I have a problem putting down cigarettes for sure, but
Yeah, that thing, about the industry, it can consume you just as quickly
it
as you can
it,
consume it.
it
Yeah,
can. And for the fact that I didn't have any problems, haven't had any problems, never been in any trouble when it comes to drinking or anything like that. I drank a lot the last 12 years, and
right,
it was enough that I needed to find something like the bicycle to instead of putting my drama into that bottle and then into the public sphere, I needed to be able to get into my head in a different way and get that shit out of me. And there ain't nothing
right.
better than thinking about whatever assholes made you mad when you're pedaling up a hill. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Just get it out of your system and
Hot
do it.
tubs are a lot easier
They
though.
are. But see, then the hot tub leads to, well, you know that bottle of bourbons,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, well, yeah. The wine and brandies
Right.
come out.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I guess that's right.
Yep. Yep. So I trying to back off that a little bit. I still love to drink. Don't get me wrong, and I always
Yeah.
will. I'll
Well, we
never.
we have to, kind of take care
Yeah.
of our bodies and ourselves, and spiritually, physically, and maintain our chi,
Right.
and take care of ourselves. So I've got to the point where I was drinking. I quit for a long time. I quit drinking for a long time. I was making wine and distilling and not even drinking it, and just giving
Mm.
it away. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and just because I enjoyed doing it. But
Yeah.
now I'm back to I sip a bit every once in a while.
Well, I'll tell you what. I like I said, I love to drink, and I'll go back to it here before too long to some degree. I also need to reset my palate a little bit. I think that that's an important thing.
Yeah.
Your palate's your main instrument with distilling and your nose. I have
So did you get any issues? Did you get COVID or have any issues with palate after getting COVID? Because mine went to shit. I got COVID. My palate was fucking gone to shit for a few years.
I was lucky. I only really had problems with my palate for about 2 weeks, and I will tell you, the way that I reset mine was literally by drinking absinthe until absinthe tasted
Right.
right. That's exactly what I did. But there was about a 2 week period where even like bourbon out of a barrel, like I couldn't have done a blend if I wanted to, because to me it all tasted a little bit like cardboard and a little metallic, and
Right.
I couldn't do it. But now I know some people who are in the industry who still don't have their sense of smell back.
Well, I lost mine for a while.
Yeah.
The tasting and smelling, because a lot of it for me is smelling,
Yeah.
and the olfactory, putting things together, and I've never was really a very good palate to begin with. I never had a sophisticated palate to begin with, but probably years of drinking. But after COVID, I mean, I used to be able to smell when Ann was making me some Kool-Aid upstairs. I could smell it in the air down here in the basement. But after
Right.
COVID, it's like, it really affected me for a couple of years. It
Mhm.
impacted me not as bad as like the first 6 months, but yeah, it definitely impacted me as far as tasting my wines and being able to
Yeah.
get the notes and stuff. I just wasn't getting it.
I grew up with so many sinus problems and stuff. I think a
Yeah,
lot
I
of
get
time,
that too.
a lot of
Allergies.
times my I think I've probably found ways to compensate for it over the years. Is my guess. Growing up raising tobacco and all that stuff, and being around it all the time, being in the
All that
middle of it.
mold and stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think I found ways to compensate for it over time. And considering that I smoke, I actually years ago I did a class with Nancy Fraley, who's insanely talented, and I was sick at the time, and of course I smoke, so I walked outside to go smoke a cigarette, and she's like, you really shouldn't do that. And we didn't know each other real well at the time. Now we know each other pretty decent. And
Right.
so she had her sensory kit there. And so we were doing blinds. And she goes, well, I can't remember how she said it. She said, I bet you can't pick up on this or name what this is with your smoking and that sinus thing. And I was like, I bet you money I can. And I matched her 1 for 1 across the board in that class. So
Awesome.
I figured out either there's something genetically predisposed or I figured out a way to cope with it over the years. One of the two.
Well, I can say that when I gave up smoking, I definitely, my nose became much
Yep.
better, at smelling things and food, flavors of food and everything was much more enhanced. I think that is as much as gaining weight after you quit smoking is just everything tastes so much better,
Mm-hmm.
and I never realized how I smelled to other people. Because I mean, I
Right.
smoked since I was like 12, 13 years old, right?
Yeah.
And I never quite realized how I smelled to other people until I quit smoking. And then I was around, family members and friends and stuff that smoke. And I'm like, man, you need to
Right.
wash those fucking clothes. When's the last time you washed those? Like, what are you
Yep.
talking about? These are fresh. And I'm like, man, these
Yeah.
smell like it's, a cigarette. It just, I
Yep.
couldn't believe it. And then I'm like, that's what I smelled like, from all those years, and
Yeah.
so give it up, Alan. You gotta,
Oh,
I quit
it's
cold turkey on my daughter's birthday 9 years ago, on her
mhm.
12th, yeah, 9 years ago.
it's
And
it's on
almost,
the list. It's on the list. It's so I gave up as I tell my wife all the time, it's one thing at a time, just like one piece at a time, right? So I don't do pork anymore. Every once in a while I'll have a piece of sausage or piece of bacon, not because of health issue. Well, that's a lie. I got gout and I don't ever want gout again.
right? I
So
love pork. I'll never give up bacon
oh
and
man, I
sausage
can't.
and pork.
Dude, there was not. It was for me. That was the most embarrassing thing ever. Like I had it so bad, I had to call my wife to come get me from work, and I
Wow.
thought, you fat ass, like this is your, like this is the thing that puts you down. It's
That's your kryptonite. Yeah.
your swollen big toe is the thing that did it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
I've got to have, I got to have my pork, even though I had chronic colitis and had to have my, uh, had a colonoscopy and had that removed and had what is it, the organ that they remove when you have colitis.
oh,
It's
just
there's
part of your
my
colon or
yeah, no, it's Lisa's usually here to help me in these moments. Where you at, Lisa? What it's the fucking, I'm gonna have to get on there and Google. Damn, my mind is going now. I'm starting to lose it, brother. Uh, Talk about something else while I'm doing this. Let me find it. I can't handle the
I'll
dead air.
I'll tell you a little bit about Old Homestead here
All
real
right,
quick.
yeah.
So
Well, one thing I was wanting to ask you about before we get to Homestead is that French Lick. I was really interested in the name. Was it you that selected the names, the Sinclair, and all these different historical names for all
uh,
these different things?
one
Or
100%. That's those are my ghosts for
awesome.
sure.
I love that. I
So
like that about those bottles too. Are classic.
that's one of the things that I desperately one of these days I want some of that back. Knowing what I know now, I would have probably
Right.
played things a little differently. But yeah, and we're doing a little bit of that at Homestead as well. I was smart enough that at Spirits of French Lick, I told some people one time that I hadn't played my best cards yet when it came to names and stuff like that, and so I always held on to some with the hope that eventually I'd have a little ownership in something before I used them. Ones I definitely didn't want to lose. So there'll be several of those coming out the next few years without a doubt. So but yeah, the old homestead thing. So it's part of a larger complex, obviously at Patoka Lake. Patoka Lake is the second largest reservoir in the state of Indiana. Lake Monroe would be the largest, but the cool thing about Patoka Lake is that unlike Lake Monroe, Patoka Lake is owned completely by the Indiana DNR, and it's surrounded by the Hoosier National Forestry. So you cannot build private docks or homes on the lake. So it's
All
about
right,
eight.
just a second here.
Yeah,
I have got some pictures that I downloaded,
awesome.
and let me see. I gotta dig them out. They're buried deep in my drive here. Everything has to be organized in its own little folder, and
All right.
when it gets that bad, there's so many folders to get through just to get there. But all right, let's see. Let's start with this one. This
Yeah,
old homestead, a picture of it.
yeah. So the company itself. So the lake is 8,800 acres total. Really cool. It gets a crazy amount of visitors, over a million a year in the summer months. The company itself, which is headed up by Steve Shirk, Stephen Bartels, Heather Setzer, and then Jolie Kasperzak and myself at the distillery. Uh, it originally started off, they had bought a gas station and then they took over the state marina down there.
Right.
And then over the years, they added a winery, they added land cabins, they added these cool grain silos that they turned into hotel suites. They added a brewery. We don't own the brewery, but we own the building. We're really good friends with the brewers over there. They make fantastic product. And then we added the distillery and the hotel. So it's sort of an all-in-one sort of thing, right? So
Right.
we're set up for what I like to think is the next wave of distillery tourism. So for years it has been what is a thing, which is alcohol and versus what it's becoming, which is what's a thing where we can take the whole family and they might also have alcohol, right?
Right. Right.
So it has its own built-in audience, obviously, with what I like to call lake Hoosiers and snowbirds. So it's one thing to be a Hoosier. It's another thing to be a lake Hoosier. That's a different classification of people, and I absolutely adore them. They're fantastic because they're not pretentious in any way, shape, or form. It's a good time all around. We call the whole complex Alcohol Acres overall. It's in a county that has less than 10,000 people population. So this is like, it's out in the middle of nowhere, but it's only about an hour from Louisville. So it's not so far away that you can't get to it. It's
Right.
close enough you can come hang out. And
Gallbladder.
there's
Gordon, Shannon
gallbladder.
Wynn.
There you
We had my
go.
chat. Everybody came up from prostate, appendix. We got pancreas. Oh yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
gallbladder. Gordon wins. Thank you, Lisa.
So
Shame on you. Where were you when I needed you? You might comment. She's busy.
so the hotel's 28 rooms, I believe, total. Then
Right.
we have the lobby there, which I think is now a part of the new Indiana DORA law, which is kind of cool. So basically, that lobby, if you go into the distillery and get a drink, or you go to the winery and get a drink, or you go to the brewery and get a drink, you can take it to the lobby of the hotel, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
Um, we have a new restaurant in there called BMF Saloon. They make
Yeah,
some
I think it's a picture of it here.
yeah, they make some the best bread pudding I've ever had in my life, actually.
Awesome. Awesome.
It's fucking phenomenal. I love it. And then the tasting room, we've had the tasting room open since the beginning of April. Really, kind of the grand opening of the tasting room was May. Well, not grand opening, but the bigger opening of it. We'll do a grand opening this fall. Was May 1st. We've been doing pretty good. The distillery itself is not yet open for tours, but we've been producing now as of this month for a year. We started off with the 250-gallon double thumper still for all the Sunshine products that are always distilled in wooden barrels.
Right.
We call it Sunshine because we obviously use sunflowers. New Albany used to call itself the sunny side of the river, so we kind of stole that from them. And also because, of course, Sunshine's legal and Moonshine isn't. So, I don't want to be one of them people making legal
Now,
moonshine.
sunshine, that takes you back to an old buddy of yours, right? That
It sure
used to make that.
does. It absolutely does. So,
Yeah. Well, there's some history behind that.
one of my best friends in the entire world, my brother Moonshine Mike Stallings.
Stallings, yeah.
For those who don't know Moonshine Mike, I give you an indication of how cool he was. So he was originally from Shoals, Indiana. I think they left there when he was about 5 and went up to Michigan. When he's about 16, I believe he hit the road traveling and following the Grateful Dead. Ended up in California. At some point in time, he and his buddy were coming back through Estill County, Kentucky, and their car broke down, and he just never left.
That's
And
cool.
started moonshining. He knew Donnie Benton. He had Donnie build him a still. Matter of fact, I have that still. I'll tell you about that here in a second. So Mike was never really an all grain whiskey maker. He was a sugar shine guy, and there ain't
Right.
nothing wrong with that at all.
Well,
And
most of it started out with cornmeal and sugar, just a
yeah,
thin mash, and that was it pretty
that's
much.
it. Yeah. But we got to know each other through social media pretty well, and then we figured out he was from Indiana, and he started inviting me to come down and hang out. And he's actually really good friends with Tyler Childers. There's some funny stories there, but they're probably not
Right.
fit for public consumption
Right. There
necessarily.
might be some stories that I can't really mention either, but
Yeah.
I may have met him at, and some of the things that we were doing. Yeah, we can talk about those things.
Well, there was a festival down there a few years back that Mike invited Hell's Half Acre to, which was my old reenactment group. And so I took my dad and my buddy DJ, and that's actually where I met Christy Atkinson at. She was just randomly in
Really
the crowd of this moonshine festival.
cool.
And so this was a music festival out in this holler out there. And Rick Gibson was there, and a bunch of guys out there for this thing. And Mike had said, "Well, we just want you to come and do like a mash in or whatever." And then Rick got invited, and then somehow, and this was when Rick was doing that stainless hexagonal Tennessee thumper, if anybody remembers that. He brought that down there, and so we were set up down by the second stage, where people just kind of wander through from time to time, pretty chilled, pretty laid back. And then by the end of the day, I went from teaching people how to mash in to full on running this illicit still and teaching a class on the main stage.
Right.
And I'm not sure if that was Mike's idea or if that was Rick's idea. It doesn't matter. I don't guess, but
Only in Eastern Kentucky can you get
yeah.
by with that kind of
Oh,
thing.
it was a good time. And that place was so cool, man. It was,
It is.
you'd walk through there, and I'll never forget this. So my daughter was with us, and she was little at the time, and everybody watched out for everybody's kids and everything. A lot of the hippie crowd. But you'd walk through a certain area, and there'd be like people with their blanket out with all kinds of different drugs for sale or trade. There was an old man that pulled up in a camper with a camper truck, and he backed up, and he just had stacks of mason jars of all types of liquor just for open
Awesome.
sale. But anyways, Mike and I got to where we'd talk about spirituality and stuff, and we talk about distilling a lot. And I would send him yeast strains and stuff like that. Like he had the Spring Mill yeast strain that he was using there before he passed away, and we would trade recipes back and forth. And we'd never copy each other. So if he told me something, I'd change it a little bit, or if I told him something, he'd change it, and then we'd share it. So he had gotten diagnosed with leukemia, and he had been in the hospital, I believe, most of the summer, and he'd gone into remission, gotten out, and he called me. He said, "Well, I'm gonna mash in. I haven't mashed in anything for a while." And I was like, "Well, what are you gonna do?" And he goes, "I got like a half a bag of sunflower seeds we were feeding the birds out here." And I thought, "You what now? You're gonna do sunflower seeds?" He goes, "Yeah, I will do sunflower seeds." I said, "Okay." So he did it, and he I don't even think he ground the sunflower seeds. I think he threw them in their hole. Of course, it would
Yeah.
have extracted the oil, and I tasted it, and it was good. There wasn't nothing wrong with it. It was enough to get me interested, and so I thought, all right, now how can I get, like, when you eat a sunflower seed, how can I get some of that flavor? And I thought, well, maybe if I germinate them, I can get some of that nuttiness. So I started by doing that, and that worked okay, but it was too grassy. And then I thought, well, maybe I can toast these things. So I
Right.
germinated them and toasted them, and that's how we ended up with the sunshine. And that's 100% a tribute to Moonshine Mike Stallings.
Some
Uh,
malted sunflower.
yeah, malted roasted sunflowers, man. We hand malt them. That's the thing about all the sunshine spirits. They're sugar shines, but they are highly intensive because there's not a single one of them that we'll ever release that does not have some kind of modified grain that we have modified ourselves in it.
Right.
Every single one of them will either have something roasted or toasted or smoked or something like that we've done ourselves. actually do that on an old an old pizza oven. That they had a set of them when they closed the restaurant at French Lick. They're going to take them to the dump, and I saw them sitting over there, and I said, "You going to throw those in the dump?" They're like, "Yeah." I'm like, "The hell you are."
No,
So there's one in my front yard we use to make pizza, and there's one at work that we use to roast sunflowers.
no. Gas,
So, and then
electric is electric or gas?
it was originally gas. So what we do is we actually I use charcoal. That's what I use, and I just put it on like a baking sheet, put it on the bottom rack,
Yeah,
throw it in there, and then put the seeds on the baking sheet above that, and you know
yeah.
get
I used to
some.
smoke stuff in a vending machine.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah. So we've got I'll tell you about the other stills there at Homestead and some of the stuff we're doing here shortly. But I do have a still that Mike built. I've got a 7-gallon that's in my tasting room that he built for
awesome.
me. I think I traded him 7 gallons of aged liquor for a 7-gallon still. And
Well,
then
that was a deal.
yeah, it
I
worked out
bet you
pretty good.
treasure that thing, man.
I do. Actually, that was the one that I carried with me in the woods for that year I was telling you about when I was out there wild fermenting stuff.
Right?
And then I have when he was sick the last time and he was in the hospital, I went to go see him. He had told me on the phone. He goes, "I got something I want to give you," and I told him not to worry about that and everything. I just want to come see him. So I went down and hung out with him for a while, and he was also an artist, actually an amazing artist. Another thing I should mention is
Yeah, he's an eclectic kind of guy, wasn't he? He's all
he
kinds of
was
musician
he was
and
a great musician.
yeah,
His buddies put out a record with him from that they recorded when they were in the hospital. And then on YouTube, there's actually on my channel on One Piece at a Time, there's a bonus episode of If You Have Ghosts that is nothing but where I went through live performances he did over the years and cleaned up the songs and added a few little pieces to them and stuff too. So there's 2 collections of music out there. And he also had started writing a biography that I'm hoping that I might have time to finish for him at some point in time because it's really really good. Um, but anyways, he had drawn me this picture and he handed it to me. He goes, "Here's a treasure map for you." And I said, "What do you mean a treasure map?" And he goes, "Well, I want to get my other buddy my 30-gallon still." He goes, "I want you to have my 50-gallon still, which he named after his wife Sandra." And so he drew me this picture with colored pencils of his barn where he used to run at and where he'd hidden all the pieces of his 50-gallon still. And then it had notes. It was hilarious because that still, it was a double thumper still, which is what our still Artemis is that we do all the sunshines on, set up like that on purpose, obviously.
right, right.
And he'd done it all the way down to that still had one single triclove and one single gasket that went to one of the 2 thumpers. And he had drawn like there was a counter space and he drew a little circle there and pointed an arrow to it and it said, "Don't forget gasket." And for some reason that always sticks out to me. I don't know why. I just find it funny. Like, don't forget the one gasket.
Right.
And so he gave me his 50-gallon still. I think Donnie Benton built the still and then Mike built the thumpers for it. And that was his main still. So we have that on display there at Old Homestead right next to the
Cool.
big stills. And that'll actually, in time, once we start doing events, we'll probably do little like 5 or 6 person events where we drag that thing out, throw some propane underneath of it and run something as a
Old
one-off.
school.
Yep.
So I've got a still pictured here. And, that head looks kind of like an Ozark creation. Am I wrong about that?
Oh, the one there on the screen. So
Yeah.
that one is not an Ozark, but I have
Oh, that looks like one of Wayne's. Huh?
I have a lot of Ozark stuff though, and there's more that we will be working
I'm glad
on.
I would have bet money that was a Ozark steel part right there.
Well, there's 2 Ozark condensers on them stills, or on that still 3 actually. There's a worm and there's 2 inlines. There's a damn steam whistle on there. I've got 2 inline thumpers I can put on there as well. I love what Wayne does. Wayne's one of
Oh, I
the
do too. I never miss an opportunity to plug him and the quality of his workmanship, man. It's top notch. He's
and
nobody better. I don't care. You know, who in the industry, nobody is as good or better finished than his. You know,
100,000,000%. And also from the standpoint of Wayne, and I also love Jason Wade Harrell at 13 Stills
oh yeah,
for other reasons. But Wayne is the one person that I know that I can call with some really advanced, really messed up idea. Explain it to him one time, he'll get it and he'll put it together, and that's
Yeah.
how we've come up with most of that weirdness for
Yeah.
Ozark Steelworks. So I wouldn't trade that for anything. Yeah. So the kind of the idea at Old Homestead is there's multiple pillars. So obviously one of the pillars is the Sunshine Spirits, which is spirits inspired by the history of moonshine. So that would be things like the White Sunshine, which has the malted roasted sunflowers. Things like Newton Stewart, which is a traditional corn shine, but made with some malted corn and using a yeast strain we captured from the old town of Newton Stewart, which is now mostly under the lake. There's a number of other products we haven't released yet because they're actually going to be barrel rested. So one's called the Wycliffe Bell, which is a Irish peat smoked oats and Irish peat smoked apple shine, and also I think rye malt. There's one called Rise and Shine, which is a rye malt and sugar. And then there's variations of it, like one where we did hickory syrup and toasted hickory bark in the thumper, one where we did citrus, and one where we did jasmine and chamomile. So really intensive, labor intensive sugar shines is what those mostly are. Then there's Black Forest Spirits, which is a little bit more on the I guess the historic side. So we have an apple spirit and a peach spirit. I don't call those two brandies because I did add sugar to them in the distillery, but they are made in the traditional way that brandies would have been made here during Prohibition. The peach is literally entire barrels full to the brim of peaches, and then we capitalize maybe 15 pounds of sugar,
Right.
something like that. The apple there's basically the same way. We are making actual apple brandy now too. And then the apple, we use one of Wayne's tricks. We actually take that and we rest a little bit of dried apples in the apple spirit.
Yeah.
And then
Dehydrated.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Uh,
one of my old tricks too. I like to dehydrate fruit
Oh
and
yeah,
use that in
it
infusion.
it works great.
Does works really well.
And then there's multiple cordials that'll come out through that line too. So like the big one right now is the 9 herb charm. So the 9 herb charm is based on an old Edda or an old poem from England at about the time that Christianity was sort of displacing heathenism or Odinism.
Right.
So you have a character by the name of Woden who sort of has these traits
So
of
is this
both.
the Dark Ages or
So this would be right around the 9th century.
okay?
So basically, this Woden character somewhere between Odin and Jesus, but he's still talking about like the 9 different realms. And what the 9 herb charm is he's talking about these 9 herbs that defeat all sickness and take away all venoms, and then he lists each of them and what they are. So we basically took that poem and found those 9 herbs, found the ones that the FDA would let us use,
Yeah.
and then replaced the ones that they wouldn't let us use with the closest relatives that they would let us use. And it's a really, really complex distillation. It's by far the hardest thing that we make. It's the fermentation is chit malted elise corn and chit malted rye. So when I say chit malted, all you're doing is you're letting it break open, and then you are arresting the development so that it doesn't continue to turn into full on malt, and you're allowing it to grow some bacteria. And then we take that and we applewood smoke it. That goes into the mash with some sugar. Some of the botanicals go in there. Some go in the still when we distill. Some go in the thumper while we distill. We collect that, take about half of that volume, and then color it with botanicals. Add it back together, and then we make an herbal sweetened tea that we proof it down with.
Awesome. That sounds
Um,
really good.
it is very,
So
very good.
what's the flavor like?
So the main botanical, and this is so funny. So first and foremost, 2 years ago, if you did a botanical spirit like that, no one would have cared. And now that's the most popular thing we have. We're selling the hell out of it. Of course, it's the hardest thing I have to make. So I don't know how I'm gonna keep up with it, but I'm gonna figure it out. Um, the main flavor that really comes to the forefront, but people can never put their finger on it until I tell them, is horehound.
Hmm.
And people people may not even realize it, but they love Horehound because they grew up with that
Yeah,
flavor.
Horehound candy, yeah.
Yep, Horehound candy and Ricola cough drops and all that stuff, right? And it's also a flavor in root beer quite
Right.
often. So they're familiar with it. They just can't quite put their finger on it. It sets about 70 proof or so. I think with the sugar added, it's about 30 bricks. So it's not like crazy, crazy sweet, but it's fairly sweet. And it's made in the tradition of Alpine style liqueurs. You could use it anywhere that you would use chartreuse. You could use it for cocktails, but honestly, if you put that in some lemon lime soda in a highball with some ice, it's pretty damn good. If you put it in an herbal tea, and this, I can't wait till winter to show people this because they'll go crazy for it. You can do this with apple brandy too. Before I tell you this, but so take if you like herbal tea, take your herbal tea and put you a slice of butter in it, put your cinnamon stick in it, put it in the microwave and heat it up, and then add about an ounce to 2 ounces of the 9 herb charm to that for your sweetener.
Cool.
And you do the same thing with take apple cider and do the same thing and do it with apple brandy. Yeah, that's that right there will do it, buddy.
Yeah, my grandpa loved that Horehound candy, man. I grew up eating it.
Yeah,
I love
yeah. I love that it almost worked out, and it's a piece of folk magic and a piece of folk history, and it almost worked out as a sort of party trick where people are like, I like this, and I don't know what it is that I like about it, and then you tell them, and they're like, oh, yeah, I didn't realize I liked that. So, but and then we did a traditional Holland style peach brandy, which is a peach cordial. Took our peach brandy and then we took peach concentrate and made a cordial with that.
it.
And we're going to do that with a lot of other fruits. The chocolate liqueur will eventually come out through that line.
And people like that better than traditional brandy.
Yeah.
Traditional brandy's just doesn't have that flavor carry
No.
forward. And
No.
that's what people expect. They expect,
Yeah.
that cordial flavor coming from a straight brandy, and it's like, I'm sorry, you can't get that.
No. Traditional, especially traditional white brandy is about like traditional white corn whiskey.
Right.
If you didn't grow up with it, you probably are not going to like
You're
it.
not going to appreciate it, right?
No.
You don't
And
know.
it's so interesting to watch too, the crowd that's coming in there. So a lot of them are levitating towards, we have some moonshine guys and they levitate towards the Newton Stewart, but then the bourbon guys are levitating towards the sunshine.
Cool.
And then the we do have these, there's these old timers in the area. There's a long tradition of moonshining in that area of Crawford County. There were legal distilleries there in the 1800s, but not in that particular part of Crawford County.
Yep.
So there's these guys that come in and they're on the older side and they'll taste through everything. And I've seen multiples of them do it, and they come back in and buy more. It's great. But they'll taste like the sunshine, they'll taste the Newton Stewart, and they'll think it's too clean. It doesn't have enough heat for them.
Right.
But they love that white peach brandy. That's what they want, because you know how peach brandy is. It don't matter what you do to it. It's always going to be a little hot.
Right.
And that's what they want. That's their thing. And so they're my crowd for peach brandy. And then I
get that with apple too.
Yep.
My apple's always a little on the hot side.
Yeah, that's why I did the apple slices in there, because I thought, well, that'll tone her down just a hair, a little bit, anyways. But so yeah, right now it's interesting because it's all white spirits or very young spirits.
It's funny to watch people's face when they drink a brandy, because it's expectations. Their expectations are something really sweet, something that has a flavor that's just going to knock your socks off, and it tastes really strong, and it's like, that's not what you're going to get with a traditional real brandy. Now, the post flavored stuff and all that, the cordials and stuff, we can get what we want. That's really what people want.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. We were having a hard time selling the white peach. Now the apple has done really well. The white peach we were having a little bit of a harder time with, but I went out front and I told them in the tasting room, because we're still finding our feet. Everybody on the team's still sort of trying to figure out, what they're doing, what's the process, what do they tell the customers and everything. And so I said, well, there's the trick to this white brandy is to do exactly what they did in the 1800s in Indiana. So uh, they the locals here in the Black Forest, they always preferred white brandy, whether it was peach brandy or apple brandy, whatever they had.
Right.
But anytime that you see it listed or you see it talked about, it was always served with a teaspoon of honey.
Right.
And so I had them make some honey simple syrup, and I said, have people taste it white, and then if they don't like it, add just a little bit of that honey simple syrup to it. And then they started selling it like crazy.
Right. Yep.
So because it
Yeah,
just,
that's what people want these days. Back, like we were talking earlier, 20, 30 years ago, no,
yeah,
they wanted, they wanted that brandy, just straight brandy. They wanted, liquor straight, white, cleaned.
yeah,
And now it's everybody wants poached. Everybody wants sweet poached. And they want, you have to knock your socks off with the flavor,
yeah,
because they don't understand the distilling process and what it takes to get that flavor carryover. I have
yeah,
to keep explaining that the distillation process is to remove all impurities, and that includes flavor.
right,
And so we're trying to defeat that at the same time, and it's tough to do. It's tough
yeah,
to get that good flavor carryover without, now with infusion and jar rigs and double thumpers and,
yeah,
things like that makes much, much better,
mm,
but still not what people
no.
want, not what they really want. They
So,
want that sweet, fruity, knock your socks off flavor.
yeah.
And,
So the a couple things here. So the other thing we do is the flavored sunshines. So this is the one place where I have a rule. So the flavored sunshines are very sweet and they're done like that on purpose because they're intended to be mixers, right? So
right, right,
say you have somebody that comes in there that likes mildly sweet stuff but don't like overly sweet stuff, and there was somebody that likes the overly sweet stuff. Well, then you buy a bottle of the white sunshine and a bottle of the flavor, and you can mix it however you want it. Or you can add these flavored sunshines, like we have a black cherry. If you drop it in some Coca-Cola, it tastes exactly like a cherry Coke. It's phenomenal.
right,
So there's that. But then the other two main pillars are rye whiskey, because rye still has a lot of room left in the market where it can actually grow and do something.
right,
There will be some other spirits too. There will be some agave spirits and things of that nature. And then obviously aged apple brandy, aged peach brandy. And then the big pillar is American whiskey. So with American whiskey is an interesting category by the TTB standards. So
right.
much like rye whiskey, as long as you don't use the term straight or bonded, you can do up to 2.
You have a lot of flexibility. Yeah,
Yep, you can do up to 2.5% harmless flavoring or coloring. Now, what's interesting is the TTB presumes by their rules that if you're going to do coloring or flavoring, you're going to do it post distillation, but they do not write it into their rules that you cannot do it during distillation.
right,
The only thing you can't do is, say, use fruit in the fermentation or something like that.
right, right,
But what we are allowed to do, for example, is take what would normally be a bourbon mash bill, run that in the still, and then fill a gin basket with apples, or fill a gin basket with raisins or with
right,
oranges, right? So this is all about variation. And here's the variations we have. So we have anywhere between 4 and 8 different yeast strains, all of which we produce ourselves, all of which taste differently. Same mash bill, I can do 8 different yeast strains. Automatically, there's those variations. Same mash bill can either be fermented in open top stainless still or open top wood. Going to give 2 different flavors. And then I can either go from the stainless still over to the 500-gallon stripping still, do a strip and a double on the 250-gallon pot still. Or I can go from the wood and go over to the 250-gallon pot double thumper and either add things to the thumpers or not add things to the thumpers and do a single pass at 140 proof. Or I can go from the wood and go to the other 250-gallon pot with the 4-plate column and pull off between 120 up to 140 proof. And then I'm not proofing it down because I don't have to be below 125 to be an American whiskey. So I'm going directly from the still into the barrel. And because not every batch produces, say, 2 full barrels, my proofs vary in the barrel anywhere from, say, 119 upwards to 155.
right,
And then we track every single variable for every single batch on the barrel. So that way, when people want to come in and do single barrels, now they can be as picky as they ever possibly wanted to be. And it's not a problem for bulk product because pot stills aren't consistent anyways. You get your consistency from your blending. So now I have all these cool colors to blend products out of. And I don't know of anybody else approaching distillation that way on that
Right.
scale.
Right.
So I'm
Interesting.
I'm pretty excited. We're doing some single malt and stuff too, but I think single malt whiskey is that's going to be a very niche category
See,
for the
that's
United
something that I've
States.
never done. I've done
Mhm.
like just straight corn,
Yep.
and but I've never done just a straight single any other grain, like an all rye,
Oh yeah.
or an all barley. I've never done a single malt. I've never done just a single grain other than
Yep.
corn. I've always done mixes.
So I've done a lot of them. One of the things that we're doing over there is so we're doing a malted rye whiskey, which is 100% malted rye, and I love malted rye whiskey, and there's not hardly anybody that makes it at all. And then our actual like single malt, which is sort of the equivalent of Scotch for us. What we did was again all Indiana grown grain, and then my buddy Caleb up at Sugar Creek, he owns the only I hope I'm saying this right, sign house in the United States. So a sign house is basically a malting house where you also kiln dry and smoke your grain. So we are using beechwood smoked and alderwood smoked and sometimes cedar smoked.
Is that spelled with a HAUSE? The old traditional way. Is this your double?
Yeah. That's Artemisia. There is who that
Yeah,
is, and
yeah,
she's changed a little since then. But yep. That's so the cool thing there is the one inline condenser that's on it there. Wayne built for me. It now has two inlines, and I now have like a 40-gallon worm tub that he built me. But a couple other cool things. So that 83-gallon thumper. That's Jason Wade Harrell at 13 Stills. I traded him a 50-gallon that I had in my basement for years for that 83-gallon thumper.
Mhm.
And then the 40-gallon thumper, that's actually one of my old stills from the house. That's a Cold Springs Copper Works 40-gallon. That's why it's still got damn scorch marks on
I was
it.
gonna say it looks like it's been over a wood fire a little bit with the
Oh, it
past.
has been many times, many
Yeah, I've
many
had some
times.
wood fired on mine.
He's a great still builder too. He really is. Makes some really nice heavier duty
Jason
stuff.
Wade Harrell, yeah, he does great. I mean, I was
I,
amazed at how quickly he was able to fabricate his steel on the show, and so with such good quality, you could tell that he's
yep,
done that a lot.
yep, yep. And Cold Springs Copper Works too. They make their stuff is awesome. They
Yeah,
don't do a lot of work anymore. So, but I ran the hell out of that 40-gallon over the years. That thing's made a
yeah.
lot
I
of
had a beer
evaporated.
keg keg steel that was black like that all the way up the sides, all the way around, and
Yeah.
I
At,
did a lot of wood back early, the day.
at
It
one,
went a lot of propane. It was
yeah.
expensive, and we didn't have just everywhere. You just couldn't pick up a banjo burner back in the '70s and the early '80s.
At one
And
point in time, Andrew from Cold Springs, we would joke that I was buying the whole set because at one point in time I had a 10. I had a 10 just like that. I had a 20 just like that, a 30 like that, and a 40 like that. So they're great stills, man. They're great,
so,
great stills.
are you barreling a lot?
Mhm.
How many barrels are you filling a day or
So
a week?
that's one of the other cool things about the American whiskey category is that because you can go in at higher proof, you don't have to use as many barrels.
Right, right.
So
Well,
we're
we talked about that before.
yeah,
There's a reason that people go into barrels as high proof as possible, and it's
hmm
because of real estate, and these rick
yep,
houses and the cost. And
yeah.
it's generally don't you do you think it's better to go in like at 110 or 20 flavor wise? I know you pull
So
different notes
I can
as you
I can definitely touch on that. So here's what's interesting. So It depends on what you're trying to accomplish and what you're distilling. Now, most places with bourbon will go in at the maximum, which is 125 for exactly the reason you're saying, which is economic reasons.
Right.
And I do like lower proofs a lot of times for bourbons, specifically because I can get micro oxidization, and because to some degree you expect the barrel to be the driving factor in a bourbon, right?
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
That's just the nature of it. You're not.
So they say, you know what, 20-40% is your white dog, and 60 to 80% is barrel in a
Yep.
bourbon. You know.
Yep. Now, what we're doing is much more in line with a traditional brandy aesthetic with the approach to whiskey. So, and I've always done my apple brandy this way. My apple brandy always, everywhere I've ever been, goes into the barrel at still proof. And then what will happen is one of two things. Either in a couple years, as it evaporates, I'll pull those barrels down and top them up with water and do that every couple years and slow proof them that way. Or I will dump them and then I will slow proof them over a number of months in a tank.
Right.
And so what that does is that actually allows you to hold on to more of the positive aromas that are there during the distillation while still getting rid of the stuff that you don't want, especially if you're running your condenser temperatures the right way.
Right.
But you have to really kind of wrap your head around the distilling methodology to get this to work right. So with the whiskeys, that's exactly what's happening. The goal here is if I'm going to use all these weird things that I'm using, all these odd grains, all these odd yeast, all these odd distillation methods, I want them to be there in that finished product when everything is done, all those positive aspects.
Right.
And I
And
don't,
you have to put a lot of work into that
yep,
20 to 40%
yeah,
to get it. You know,
yep.
when you get that 60 to 80 barrel coming through, you know,
So,
that's what makes it unique, is that 20 to 40 that you can
yep.
put into that. Yeah.
And the goal here is, and this is where Spirits of French Lick helped me over the years, having that restriction that I had, because I have an understanding that I wouldn't have had 8 or 9 years ago from doing the things that I've done.
Right.
So the idea is that this becomes a art of blending and balancing. So I can tell you that from my perception on scale, when it comes to something as simple as yeast, with
I love it when people say, "Oh, yeast, they're all the same." It's like, man, you know, you have no idea what you're talking about.
with
There's no quicker way to say I'm very limited on my knowledge than to
with
hear
the
somebody say, "Oh, they're all the same." It's
yeah,
like,
they don't
oh,
know. They don't
yeah,
know.
oh,
With the right POF positive yeast strain, I can drift the aroma and the flavor of a mash bill, even in a barrel after 4 years, probably 10 to 15%. Right. So now we're talking an entirely different percentage of what affects what. So what I want in general is going to be more 50% provided by the fermentation and the distillation methodology, and 50% by the barrel
right.
is what I want. That's what I'm after. And that's the differentiating factor. Would it be way easier to drive with the barrel? Yeah, but everybody's done it and everybody's doing it and everybody's going out of business.
And you taste like everybody else's.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah,
And our distillation methodology, and I think Tyler would tell you this, and Tyler would be a good one to get on here, man.
yeah.
Tyler, I love that boy to death. He is the single best still hand I've ever had. I don't have to tell him anything. It's awesome.
Man, you can just see his head getting bigger as you say that. Yeah.
It's getting there. It's getting there. But see, listen, I've got. He doesn't know this, but he will never get offered another job anywhere else, because anyone who offers him another job, I will hire a hitman to take them out.
Oh, just give him a terrible, you know, when he uses you for a reference. Oh, hell no.
Oh, he don't know shit. Yeah,
He's the worst head. I tell you what,
but
I'd give him away if I could.
with
Yeah.
with our methods, and Tyler can verify this. You really have to be. It's intensive. That place is. It
But
is not easy.
anybody that thinks this is easy has never done it. You know,
And
there's
and
nothing easy about it. You know,
and
the
we.
easy part is making wine. When you just if
Mhm.
you just sit around and wait for that one thing. But when you're in the business, you don't just have that
Yep.
one going. You know,
And
it's constant. You know, it's a constant thing. You know,
And
you've got one
Tyler,
going, you've got one distilling, you've got another in mash, you've got another in transition. It's always, you know,
and
something.
Tyler and me and my dad, because he was here too before he took retirement. We've taken that to the nth degree with this place. Like
Well, I've
there,
heard about old Dale Bishop
yeah,
taking his retirement. He's
he'll be coming back part time here shortly.
that's good. I read it
But
into that. I heard that
yeah,
just a while
yeah,
back. Everybody's
yeah.
missing Dale.
He had to have a hip replacement, and my mom was having some health problems, so he's mostly sitting around in his underwear watching the Andy Griffith Show and Matlock. I think
Hopefully he's watching this right now. But I will tell you, you know, hip replacement surgeries come along so much.
oh
You know,
yeah,
back 40 years ago when I was young and my grandmother had it, you know, they gave her like 4 or 5 years. After you have that done, you just don't have that much more time. You know, it's like,
right,
you know, nowadays it's, you know, it's not a
yeah,
big deal.
and no big
It's,
deal.
yeah,
He was up and moving quick. It didn't take him long at all.
yeah, they've come a long way.
But we could have set this place up to run very easily, and we purposefully chose not to. Um, which maybe 10 years down the road, I look back on it and go, "You idiot!"
So masochistic or what? Are you
Right.
punishing myself? Why did just bring in the whips and beat my back while I was doing
this
it? You
is
know,
this is how you get to the point where one day you're like, you know what? I own enough of this that I don't have to be here every day.
right?
you
Yeah,
know, so. But we love it, and it's a lot of fun, and I want to do it that way. It's important to me. People appreciate that, and I like to speak with authenticity about the things
yeah.
that I'm doing.
I mean, you have
So
to put your heart in every bottle, or it's just another bottle.
mhm.
You know, there's plenty of bottles on the shelf. You
Now
know,
here's something else crazy for you, man. I never thought I'd say this. So for years it was no secret that I was a home distiller. I was a proud home distiller. It was all over YouTube, all over Facebook.
yep, yep.
I had to take a lot of my process videos down when I went to Old Homestead and get away from that because I become an owner, right? Allegedly, I was a home distiller, right? That's the case when you become an owner in something. And the cool thing about Old Homestead is that my desire and want to do the distilling at home for spirits alcohol is not really there anymore because it's being met at Old
Right. Yeah, you
Homestead.
can do it right there. You know,
Yeah, and I never had that before. And so that's why I have time to ride a bicycle or like the thing I'm playing around
or
with
do a
now.
podcast. I'm so glad we
Yeah.
were able to get you pinned
Yeah.
down because I know you got a lot going on, man. You
Mhm.
got lot of oars in the water. You know, a lot
I
of things happening.
started playing with I am doing a little distilling on the side now at home. I started playing around with perfumes and essential oils. That's something I've wanted to do for a long time. It's another part of the art of alchemy, and you know what? It doesn't involve distilling alcohol,
All right.
and
So you use that little Vevor pot for that little
I,
football.
I got I got that bad boy, and then I got a bunch of cool stuff. But the main thing that I use for this is I've got my favorite still of all time, my absolute favorite still of all time. I would not trade this. And matter of fact, when I die, my ashes are probably going in this fucking thing. I'm not even joking. So it's I went to an estate auction a few years ago from a very famous distiller, and at one of the distilleries that he worked at, they must have had one of those it's like a 3 gallon hoga, one of those Spanish or Portuguese copper pots.
Like
And
Olympic.
yep. And somebody had dropped this thing and busted the head all the hell, messed the neck up. Then they tried to TIG weld a new neck onto it. And it was just sitting on a shelf. And I asked the lady how much, and she gave it to me. And I brought it home and I thought, man, that'd be just like a cool, like flower vase when I'm doing demonstrations or something. And the more I kept looking at it, I was like, no, I got to rebuild this thing. So she is the ugliest little pot in the world. She's I've knocked so many dings out of her over the years that you know how they have like little hammer marks on them. She's almost smooth. They're almost gone. And I built this little goofy square condenser for it, and I've got different heads I can switch in and out. And as a matter of fact, last time I got to hang out with Mike for his last party that he had, we went down there and I took that. That's my traveling still. And so we had made a base alcohol and we went down there and took a bunch of Rose of Sharon's off of his trees. And infused that and did a couple live distillations and just handed out jars to the audience. And so that's now the main perfume still, is that little 3-gallon
Cool.
beat up thing that I love to death. And my wife knows about the urn thing. I've told her, I said, just stick me in that damn thing. It's fine. So
Yeah. Then she's gone, and somebody decides, hey man, let's run this pot.
yep.
Next
Yep.
thing you know,
Here's
old Alan Bishop got distilled
that's
again.
right.
Yeah.
That's right. Alan Bishop Pachuga.
Yeah, he scorched it.
Oh, well, here's a one more little nobody knows everything and nobody's the best in the world moment for you. So before we wrap up here, because I have to go to bed, but
Yeah, I understand.
playing around with this perfume thing the other day, I got busy. I was working on the 2026 Practical Distillers Almanac, and
That I wanted to bring that up.
yeah,
Can you have a link that you can send me on Facebook that I can share? Because
yeah, yeah,
I'm not sure if I've got the if you have Ghosty everything, that's on Spotify, right?
yep, yep.
All right, let me post that while you're coming up with that. I didn't find the other link for that. Let's see, make sure. Now this is if you have Ghosty of everything. It's very entertaining and a lot of fun to listen to some of those stories.
Yeah, I love doing that show. That's a passion project for me for sure, without a doubt.
I have a story I'll tell you sometime about my brush with the spirits and with ghosts
Yeah.
and stuff. It was very interesting. Um, a little note while you find that link for me. I grew up next to a place called the Creekmore Mansion, and it was a Gothic steamboat house built in Pike County, Kentucky, Pikeville, Kentucky, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it was architecture that was extremely unique to that area. Um, it was a crime that they allowed them to tear it down just here recently. The college bought it and tore it down, but it was right next to our house, and it being a Gothic architecture, of course, it became a haunted house. But the Creedmoors that lived there, they had a daughter named Geraldine, and she was an albino, and she was born with a lot of disabilities. Let's just put it that way. And she wasn't able to speak, and she was really pale, and she had red eyes, and it was just the scariest thing to be around when you're a child, you know.
Right.
And she would come out there, and you know, my house faced right at theirs, and she'd come out there and she'd, you know, speak, you know, in her own way. Hi, you know, you couldn't understand her, but you know, and at night, I would look out my window and I'd see her looking right at my damn house in
Oh
my
no.
window, and she'd be, ah, yeah, she'd see me, and I'd be like, oh no, I'd freak out, you know. And one day, she snuck up behind me and bit me.
Mm.
And it's like, oh my God, I just knew I was going to turn into,
I'm becoming one.
yeah, I'm going to turn into just like her. You know, I'm going to turn just like a vampire. I've been bitten and all this stuff. But in 1978, my dad bought this bass boat, and really nice bass boat. It had a 175 horsepower on it, and it was the biggest motor at the time that just come out with it. It was badass, and it was like a race car sitting there on, you know. And so I had my buddies up there, and I was showing, you know, John Vinners was up there, you know, good old friend of mine from my childhood. And we were looking, I was showing him my dad's new boat. We were oohing and ahhing over that big motor, you know, and all that. So we look over into the Creekmore Mansion's house, and there was a chair there, and it was an old Queen Victorian type chair, but you could see a bare leg over the left, I guess it was the left arm of that chair, and there were people in white capes. It was kind of almost KKK-ish, but it wasn't like the hooded, you know, wasn't
Yeah.
track like that. But and they walked around her in circles, and it was just and kept circling around her. And then at one point in time, they started going, you know, just one person, and they were walking around and around and around, and all of a sudden one person just broke off, and they all followed, and they went upstairs holding their candles. No lights on in that house at all. And I've been in that house many times, and there was 3 levels. Well, by the time we saw the last person through the window hit those steps, they were already in the top floor. And it's
Interesting.
like, man, there's no way that they could have gotten there that quickly like
Yeah.
that. And it's like, how did they do that? It's like they had to have, it was just supernatural. It's like,
Yeah.
how did they get up there that quickly? And it was just, I don't know what kind of seance kind of thing that they were doing over there, but man, I was after that point in time, I was so scared of that house. I would not. I mean, I hated. I used to take shortcuts coming up that driveway
Yeah.
to get to my house. Never again. I never.
Uh,
Oh man, it was just it was horrible, man. And it was an old house. They had slave quarters, and there were graves in the
mhm.
yard, unmarked graves down in the yard that everybody said that were probably slaves, and there were shackles in the basement where they whipped slaves and stuff. It
Wow.
was it was yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it was bizarre,
Yeah.
but yeah.
I love researching all that kind of stuff and spirituality and talking about all that kind of stuff. That's
Oh, it was yeah, that was a scary, scary place. But let me post this.
but yeah, I was working on that new almanac, and you'll laugh at this. So I was doing a lemon balm extraction, and so you just running water in the still and steam distilling lemon balm, and I got distracted writing this article, and I forgot that still was running, and I ran that fucker dry and melted every bit of solder out of it that I'd put in it.
Oh no,
So the past couple of days have been spent scrubbing that thing down, taking everything apart, resoldering it, and I thought, yeah, this is this it's just like me physically.
yeah.
Like this
So
this
when I
this
said scorch, that kind of
Yep,
just
yep.
that brought that memory up.
Oh yeah. It was one of those things where I thank God I've been riding a bicycle, and I'd ridden the bicycle the day that I did that, because otherwise a year ago I'd have lost it. I'd have
Yeah, been a
lost it.
fit. Huh?
And this
Yeah.
time I just walked over, and
Oh well.
I saw by the color of the copper, I was like, you idiot.
Yeah,
You idiot. What have you done?
I really did that. Yeah,
Yep.
I've done it the same. Everybody's done it. Everybody's walked away and forgot to, you know, left
Yep.
their back set and their copper steel for 3 weeks and went back and it was just green on the inside from the acid. And,
Yep.
we've all been there and done that. Yeah, we all
It
make those kind of
happens.
mistakes.
It happens. But
But
yeah,
there's what I hate going through. Sometimes I go through a lot of the file section, a lot of these groups that are on there, and that sometimes I see your almanac on there, and I'm like, man, just buy an almanac from the guy. Don't put that shit out there like
oh, I
that.
didn't even know that they were doing that.
Yeah, I've got it in a PDF, and it's in a lot of the groups and stuff. I've actually got it. I read it, and I felt bad
I
about it. And I'm like,
appreciate it.
I took it out of the groups that I was, I wasn't the one that put it there, but I was adminning in some groups that it was put there, and I took it out. It's
Well,
just not right.
I appreciate that. And here's what I'd say to anybody that will do that. I'm not real picky about people, taking information and using it. I put it out there for people to use it. But here's what I'm gonna say: if you're going to do that, and you know, and you see this, at the very least, why don't you take about $20 and throw it to some charity that matters, and
Right,
not be an asshole about it? You don't have to pay me, but
right.
you ought to give somebody something for it.
Or at least give you a plug. There's so many people, that love tearing people down and try to use people as stepping stones and kind of step on them, trying to build themselves up and stuff. And I don't think people realize that gets you nowhere,
Yeah.
in life or in this industry, or in
Yep.
anything really.
Yep.
It's much better to be a builder, to build people up and promote other people. Some people be like, this dude's got a podcast. Why would you bring a podcast on your podcast and promote his stuff? And it's because I love the content, man. I love his stuff, man. I've watched it for years. And
Oh,
hell,
oh, God
I want
forbid.
I want everybody that watched mine to watch
Yeah.
his because they're going to enjoy it as much or more than they do mine. I'm not trying to pass people away from me, but I'm
No,
sharing the knowledge. I mean, I'm sharing not just knowledge. I want to
well,
share, some of the goodness that's out there,
and
and
it makes you wonder why they care. I mean, why do they think I'm doing this? Because I can tell you this, I ain't making no money
right,
doing those
you
things.
know, I've given every Wednesday and Saturday, for
Yeah,
years away doing all these podcast stuff. I've never made the first penny,
they're just
not
pissed
one
because
penny.
they ain't doing it. They're just mad because they ain't doing it.
Right.
They
You know,
want that they want on that TV show is what they want.
yeah, and that's, yeah, it's silly, man. I like to build my brothers up though. I like to help
Yeah,
them and build them up, and I know that when you do that, that you'll get it, in kind. It's the way people are,
absolutely.
and
Yep.
and that's the way we all should be. We should promote each other and help build each other up,
Yeah.
because
I
steel builders the same.
yeah,
There's plenty of business out there for everybody. There's no use in
yeah.
tearing each other down and trying to comment on other people's work. Like this one person we don't mention the name of anymore. It's kind of one of those Beetlejuice things,
Yep.
you know.
No, I appreciate it, man. I appreciate the opportunity to come on the
I
show
love
and
having y'all, man.
yeah.
Anytime you want to come on here, anytime you got extra time, we'd love to have you on. It's always great to get different answers to this. I get the same questions, and I like having a different perspective for some of the answers, and it would help them too.
Yeah.
And definitely, I know that if you were able to, you'd be doing it more often on your own. And but I know how busy you are, so I definitely appreciate any time you can spend with us
Absolutely.
and jumping on here. And because there's a lot of people out there that are trying to educate that shouldn't. And I remember your post talking about that, and I couldn't agree more.
Hmm.
There's a lot of people out there that really should not be trying to pass on any kind of knowledge because they haven't attained
Because
it yet.
they don't have it. Yeah,
Yeah, they
exactly.
don't have it yet. Right.
If you don't know the rules well enough to be able to play fast and loose with the rules, then you don't need to be telling people how to
That's
do
right. That's
anything.
right. That's exactly right.
But I'll tell you what, man. Maybe give me a few months down the road here, and as I get some things more in order, get this next almanac done. Uh, Maybe we can get together again this fall, and I'll send you some samples, and then that way
Sounds
you can
great. Yeah,
taste through some
that'd be awesome.
homestead stuff.
That'd be
Yeah,
awesome. And maybe, you can bring some of your friends on and we can all do a little tasting
yeah,
together
that'd
and
be great.
chat. Because I can do up to 10 people. We were
Yeah,
talking earlier, bring some of your buddies on. I'd love to meet them,
we can do that.
and we can bring Amanda and JJ on and a
Yeah,
few others to have a good time. Bring Jay on
hell yeah,
and
hell
yeah,
yeah.
that'd be great.
Yep,
But I
I'm
definitely look forward to trying some of those samples, and I know they will too. So let's plan on doing something like that this fall. I like the sound of it for sure.
sounds good to me. Sounds good to me.
All
So
right, brother. It was always good talking to you, and I appreciate your time because I know it's valuable, and I'm sure everybody here is learned and will take a lot of things away from today. And I'm glad, Wayne, that most do. There's a few out there, like I was saying, that don't, and you know, well, they're not really spoken of much anymore, and not well of, and when they are spoken of.
hey, if you're going to steal an almanac, then you need to buy something from Ozark Steelworks or 13 Stills.
Yeah, there you go. And I promote them all the time. I
Yep.
got a shirt. Got to plug my buddy, and I show that little that whiskey stave and funnel I got off of him as often as I can too. It's
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I love it. It's such fine craftsmanship. Just looking for the seam. Knowing
Yep.
there's a seam, but where is it? And it's so
Where's it
hard.
at?
Yeah, you pull out the magnifying glass. There it is. Wow, I think I can see it there.
My
Such good work, man. It's awesome.
my favorite pieces I have. I'll tell you this. I'll wrap up and jump off here, but I show them off at the distillery every time somebody walks over there. My two favorite things I have are my whiskey thieves that he built with my brass knuckle handles.
Yeah.
I love it.
Well, I didn't get the brass knuckle handle, Wayne. I'm
Oh,
a good thing.
you got to buy the brass knuckles and send them to him, and then call him.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
You gotta get real drunk at about 11:30 at night and call him and be like, "Hey man, I had
that was awesome
I
idea.
had this crazy idea. before, you just go ahead and put the brass knuckles in the mail before
Yeah.
you call him. So that way it kind of guilts him a little bit.
Yeah, you can't say no kind of thing. Well, I already sent it, man.
Yeah, it's on its way, dude.
Yeah.
Be there on Friday.
Yeah, awesome.
But I appreciate it,
All
brother.
right, brother. It's great having you on here. And next time, hopefully, we'll be able to see you.
Yep, I hope so.
I'm going to have to send you a little webcam or something.
Yeah.
I've got this little Logitech Jewel. This is like 720p, and I'm using its microphone actually right now. My mic and my
But
headset went out.
sounds
So
good.
yeah, it does, and it's like it was cheap when I got it. It was like 29 back in the day, and I don't even think they make them this cheap anymore. Low
Probably not.
resolution. It's like a 720. It's not even a 1080. So resolution's fine for a little teeny square. It's not like huge. So yeah. So we'll get you something over there so we can see you next time.
All right, brother.
All right, brother. I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to this fall. Definitely look forward to. We'll set up a time for that.
Yep.
And I know you. I'd ask if you're going to any festivals this year, but I know you're too damn busy for that.
No, I guess I should probably say though. So I can't remember the date. It's in September for anybody who's interested. I will be back out at Spring Mill State Park at the Daisy Spring Mill Distillery doing the history of distilling in the Black Forest for the Candlelight Festival. So
well, let us know on the militia page so we can and Rock Gut page so we can post that, put it in the calendars and stuff, and promote it.
Yeah, I definitely will. And then as we get into as we start flirting with distribution in other states, there may be some of those festivals that I can more easily be able to justify getting away from work to go to.
Right, so make it a write-off.
Yep, exactly. So
that's the best ones.
That's for sure.
Yeah,
that's for sure. And get somebody in there to help Tyler, or ideally Tyler would be going with me. So
yeah.
But all right. Well, you have a good evening, sir.
All right, brother. Take care, and I appreciate you coming on, and look forward to having you back this fall. And if you got time between now and then, jump on, let me know, and we'll love to have you on here anytime, brother.
Sounds good.
Appreciate it. Y'all take care. All right, everybody. That's going to wrap it up. I'm sorry we didn't have time for a Q&A, but we'll do that. We'll do that the next time, for sure. We've got a lot of things out of the way. I wanted to introduce, Alan for those that didn't know and haven't met him or heard as much about him. Can't say enough good about the guy. He's great for the industry. He's with his knowledge. Most people with his knowledge would never spend the time, that he spends with us and trying to help and educate and doing his almanac and doing his podcasts and stuff as well. He's an educator as well as historian and probably one of the most knowledgeable people I know. I want to meet Patrick Heiss though, because he's definitely the bomb. It's the science. He's the guru. And I know he knows it down to the molecule, to the atom. So this dude's amazing. And that's kind of my thing. I want to learn that science all the way down to the subatomic level, but it's great having Alan on, and it's great having y'all with me tonight. I appreciate y'all coming in. Now, Saturday, I won't be here. We're going to be at Philbilly's. So those of you that can, try to make it over there. It's going to be a great time. 11th and 12th this weekend, Friday and Saturday. They're in Columbus. I'm trying to remember the name of the damn bar that it's going to be at. Somebody help me while I go to the militia page looking for it. And I did that the other day and I couldn't find the damn thing, so I'm gonna try again. So somebody help me. All right, somebody. What's the name of the bar? Somebody tell me. Let's see, militia. Let's see. Let's see, where does it show that? Dang it. Why is that not pinned to the top? That should have been pinned to the top. I'm going to blame Damon on that. Anyway, does somebody know the name of this bar in Columbus that this? I better find out before I go. I've got to find it. Shit. How in the hell is it? Feel it. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Snickers Bar and Grill. It was right over here on the right side. I never look on that side of the page. Snickers Bar and Grill. West 9372 West 3rd Street, Dayton, Ohio. Snickers. I just remember Snickers Bar. That's easy to remember. Fuck, I didn't remember that. Snickers Bar. There you go. I won't forget. So that's where we'll be this weekend. So if any of you guys in the neighborhood, yeah, thanks, Curtis. Fucker, come up with it. But yeah, we'll be there this weekend. It should be a great time, man. It'll be a lot of fun. We'd love to have some of you guys, or all of you guys and gals that can make it, come out and have a good time with us. And I guess I'll see you next Hump Day. So everybody have a great week and weekend. We'd probably try to do a live on Friday, and who knows, we may try to jump in there Saturday and do a hey, but we're not going to be doing a Q&A. We'll just be, because I'll probably be hammered. I'm going to definitely be hammered, and I'll I'm not going to be much of a teacher. I might be teaching you what not to do on a Saturday night, but yeah, I appreciate everybody tuning in. Everybody, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't on Philbilly's page and on the Militia page on YouTube. If you're watching there, hit that thumbs up button. It helps us a lot, really. It does. It helps get more people watching and gets us in some of the reels and stuff. So if you're watching us out there, subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and Facebook, yeah, hit you like and heart buttons and tell us how much you love us. Until I guess next Hump Day, everybody have a great week and a weekend, and we will see you back here on Wednesday. Till then, everybody take care and shine on, stay safe. Love y'all. Take it easy.